And we are live, folks. Good evening. How are you doing? Welcome to another special live from the Simpa Life. I am joined this evening by two veterans from the cannabis activism scene. I'm going to read you first Alun's extensive introduction here. Alun is our first guest. He is Alun Buffry, is an independent campaigner for recognition and protection of our human rights and freedom of choice. He's been campaigning for 30 years. From 1999 to 2006, and previously, he was co-founder of the National Coordinator for the Legalized Cannabis Alliance, the LCA, a registered political party that stood for Parliament in 2001. He is an author, a webmaster, and runs many Facebook pages, as well as the Cannabis Campaigners Guide, ccguide.org. Our second guest this evening is Mr. Winston Matthews, who is a cannabis activist, a herbalist, and in his own words, a keyboard warrior. Evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I've very much been looking forward to having you both on to do this. Anytime. So I suppose first thing to do here is, I think unfortunately a lot of the audience here will not be too familiar with yourselves. So obviously my base introduction there very just slightly scratched the surface. So could you both give me sort of a bit more of a background as to your history within sort of cannabis activism and the campaign to sort of end cannabis prohibition? Mhm.
So of course I stuck a couple of grams in some butter, melted it in a saucepan, made a cup of coffee, drank it, and bang. And it was fantastic. I lay on the floor, I listened to Pink Floyd, I thought I was traveling through space and time. It was fantastic. And I remember going downstairs, being really thirsty, and going downstairs and eating a peach, and it was orgasmic. This taste of the peach, I never tasted anything like that in my life. It was an incredible experience, and I was turned on, you know. And from that day, I wanted to turn everybody on. I thought if everybody can experience this, that all it did for me really is it made me feel better than I felt.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's medicinal or whether that's recreational, I don't know. It made me feel better, and I wanted people to feel better. I believed that the world would be a better place if everybody had access to this plant, which I recognized as a plant even on that first occasion, not a drug. And from then on, it took about 6 months, because every time I took the coffee bang, I was lying down. All my friends were carrying on, and I wanted to, communicate with them. So I decided to have a smoke. So somebody made me a joint and said, have a puff on that. It might sound strange, but at 20 years old, I didn't know how to smoke. I said, how do you get it inside you? And he said, well, suck on it like a straw. So I sucked and I swallowed, and I sucked and I swallowed, and then I burped, and then I got high, and I learned very quickly how to smoke, and it was with tobacco, and so I carried on smoking with tobacco until eventually I ran out of hash, and I thought I'll try a cigarette, and I tried a cigarette, and then I smoked cigarettes and hash and joints, and then chillums, and over my life I've smoked water pipes, bongs, vaporizers, hookers, joints, spliffs, buckets. Buckets, I don't know if people know about buckets. You put a bottle with you cut the bottom out of a bottle, a glass bottle or plastic bottle, and you immerse it in water so it fills up with water. And then we used to put a bit of silver foil on the top with holes in, and the hash or the weed. And then as you pull the bottle up, you light it. So the gravity pulls the water down, pulls the air through, fills up with smoke. You pick it up and you smoke it. And it's lovely. Mm-hmm. Well, I went one further than that. When I was in Spain, I smoked a swimming pool.
Good way of doing it.
And so I smoked for 50 years. And well, on and off, I did have stops. I did have, I was in prison during that time. I did have a few days out of 4.5 years that I was in prison for dealing, because as soon as I realized that people needed this plant and I found the supply, I started passing it on, and I did make a profit, and I did smoke the profits, and I did that for a long time. And eventually I got busted and fined, and then I got busted for conspiracy for, I think it was 150 kilos. And I got 10 years, 2 concurrent 10-year sentences for conspiracy to import, conspiracy to supply, which meant I went to a maximum security prison. Of course, it's not easy to get cannabis when you're in prison. I actually, over 4.5 years, I did go 4.5 days without it. You can get cannabis in prison, obviously. And during that time, I also stopped for a few months now and again. And when I came out of prison, I stopped for a few months and I started again. And this went on for, I would say, 50 years. And it might be a surprise to some people, but about 15 months ago, I decided to stop for 2 weeks. I didn't give it up. I just stopped. So I could stop and start. I didn't give it up. I stopped for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, I thought, I'll give it another 2 weeks. And then along came lockdown. So I didn't have the social connection with people. I still had the access to cannabis. I still had some. Mm-hmm. And the 4 weeks became 2 months, became 6 months, and it's now 15 months. So I haven't smoked, eaten, vaporized, or any cannabis in 15 months. I haven't missed it at all. I did get some vivid dreams to start with, but I found life is fine for me. I don't get any specific medical reason to use it. I'm reasonably healthy. I'm a bit fat, but apart from that, I'm reasonably healthy. And funny thing is, a couple of days ago, I thought I heard something drop by the side of my chair, and I looked down, and there on the floor was a piece a little bit bigger than a pea of some nice Moroccan hash. And I haven't even seen any Moroccan hash in my house for, 14 months. And I thought, is this a gift from the gods? Is this a sign? Or is it the devil tempting me? So yesterday I had a little puff. Just a little puff. I had a headache. And I thought, I'll just have a little puff in my pipe. And I had a little puff, match head size. Headache disappeared instantly. I didn't really get a buzz out of it, but the headache disappeared instantly, and I ate all day.
Good.
And during that time, I've devoted a lot of my time, the first 1970 to 1991, I spent selling it, supplying it to people, quality assured, money back guarantee. I believed in the ethics, like hippie principles or head principles, if you like. And then 1999, I came out of prison in 1995. There was a campaign, and Howard Marks had just been released as well from America, and I met him, and I realised that I'd actually met him in 1976 when he came to Norwich to get a passport in the name of Donald Nice, which he called Donald Nice. And during that episode, Donald Nice was a friend of mine, and Howard wanted to get a smoke, so Donald Nice brought him around to me, and I sold him an ounce of Lebanese. And he told me in 1996, he told me that he brought that Lebanese into the country, and he paid me about four times the amount that he sold it for. And so I asked him, along with Jack Girling, who was running the campaign to legalise cannabis, I asked Howard if he considered standing for election. And he said yes on a single issue, which is exactly what we wanted. So Howard stood for election, and then we decided this is a really good platform. And this is one thing that we're missing today, is a platform. So when we formed the political party in 1999 and started to put candidates up for election, we had a platform. We suddenly found ourselves sitting next to politicians in hustings, putting leaflets through the door, doing 2 TV interviews, radio interviews, canvassing on the street, and it was legitimate.
Yeah.
And nobody got nicked, and that lasted till 2006 when the politics changed and the Legalised Cannabis Alliance decided not to register any longer as a political party and became a campaign group. And it was necessary at the time, but sad really, because we did lose that platform and the unity. Although it wasn't complete unity, we did have an alliance. A lot of different people coming from a lot of different places, not arguing about it. Some predominantly medicinal, some environmental, some recreational, some, for lots of different reasons, lots of different backgrounds, education, beliefs, and we were united. We were united under a barrier. And then I met people like Winston and Chris Baldwin and Don Barnard, and Noel Van Schaik in Holland, Colin Davis, Mark and Leslie Gibson. I can rattle off probably 100 names, so I don't want to bore everybody. If you don't know who they are, look up the Legalised Cannabis Alliance online and make sure it is the Legalised Cannabis Alliance, and you'll find a list of all those people. You'll find a list of what we did, all the interviews, all the letters. It was active. It was constant active with a focus on elections, not getting elected, but getting a platform.
Yeah.
And that's what I've always tried to, achieve. So I better let Winston say a few words.
Pardon?
I better let Winston say a few words.
No, you was doing well there. I mean, I came involved with the Legalised Cannabis Alliance after doing some direct activism with Chris Baldwin and a few other campaigners of going around different coffee shops and, helping open these coffee shops and do the artwork around them and helping in as many ways as what I could, even washing the dishes and that. But, working with people like Chris Baldwin was quite incredible. He was determined to get change. So it was an atmosphere that I saw. I saw lots of people coming in. I saw thousands of people getting involved at one time. And when the proverbial shit hit the fan after about 151 days with the bong shuffle one, then I remember me and Chris sitting at the side of this van. This is a story often told, so I'm glad to be reiterating it. And we looked at each other and we just started laughing. And the policeman looked at us and said, "Why are you laughing? You know, all this, you know," there was a lot of police, there was a lot of people under arrest, and we was the last two sitting there. And we said, "Well, you finally done it. We've been waiting for this for 151 days. We thought it was going to be over within about a week." You know, suddenly it just escalated and got more and more. We had to learn more skills and meet more people, more things. It was fun. It was fun. It was just absolute fun. But when it hit the fan, it was like, wow. And there were so many people jumping out to help us as well. The atmosphere down there, people collated together. They'd had a coffee shop for 151 days. They still wanted one, you know, go in, variety, have a chat. You know, we had a thing which Noel van Schleich, who Chris had done a course with, ran it on that Dutch style that we had never people in who was drunk or anything. No people being rowdy. Who the hell's going to be rowdy? It really went smoothly. Often we'd even have Chris's mum at the door letting people in. It was that laid back, and she was 81. And it was, yeah, and it was Dottie would have a bong with them, you know, and really enjoy it. So it was that Chris would be donating to charities, the local ones, send me out to pay, you know, get stuff from the cat rescue and do a bit of sort of Dada artwork. I try and do with the models and stuff I buy from there, just to give people something to focus on that day. We had artwork being done by artists around. We had just a nice atmosphere, and it was a shame because we kept opening that one, and we opened another one, and we kept trying to push that message forward until finally Chris got locked away and all three of us ended up in court. And it was unfair, but he was only in for about 6 weeks. After then, that's when I started meeting Alun and going along to LCA meetings, because I was disgusted at the way that they treated Chris. There was a man I'd met who would give his last bit of herb to anybody who looked like they needed it, and you know, and asked for a reward. He was the most genuine bloke whose warmth rubbed off on a lot of people. A lot of people were down at his funeral because he was popular. I couldn't make it at the time. I was just having a liver transplant and I was ill from that. So I wish I had been, but Chris got me through the transplant. I remember at that time when I've got a call that I've got a liver. He's literally on the other end of a Skype there, saying to me, "Right, calm down, go and get your bag, go and get this, go and get ready. Have you rang your care?" And like, you know, when I was in prison because of going for the grow your own, pushing it so much at the time, thinking I could do it, but little stories how I came unstuck. He wrote to me every day. And like, so did many people when I was in there. So the camaraderie in this cannabis community that I've seen, and the people now pushing for it, and the various groups, the various fractions, all going from their own direction, each a pronged attack towards whether it's the legislature, whether it's a writing of legislature, whether it's the medicinal application, whether it's its use at recreational use. We got so many arguments in human rights is why I first got involved. I remember reading human rights in 1998 when it first came out. And I thought, wow, we've done it. We've really done it. And I think it was in 1999 when I went to Bonfire Day and I met people like you outside Parliament protesting. Patman was there, and I built a bong outside and had one out there to do, because I was a man of very few words. It doesn't sound like it now, but I thought actions speak louder than words. That's what I've gone there doing. You know, showing people we could have a good community. But the LCA gave me that platform that Alun talked about earlier. And even after we got that grade C, everybody thought, oh, we've done it. But me and Alun were still pushing for certainties, because we had an idea they could move it back. We often discussed it. Come on, how can we get more people involved in trying to finalise this and make it a law? And as you know, 2009, and I attended ACMD meetings and everything in order to try and get it bang straight back again. And they got the budget to start busting people again. Yeah. In which case, a lot of us did start getting busted. And you know, I'm going to shut up and let Alun do some talking here because I am rabbiting.
As you were discussing that, the 2009, that'll have been, so it was Jackie Smith as Home Secretary, that she pushed it back up to a B against the ACMD's recommendations. So that was obviously...
Is it Jackie Smith? Yeah, she was around that time.
I think it was because she took flack for the fact that her husband had smoked weed or something similar.
No, she admitted she smoked it herself previously, as did all the Home Secretaries over about 10 years. Well, yeah, Charles Clark stood in Norwich. I stood against him in the election, and somebody asked all the candidates who has smoked cannabis, and I was because of my surname, I was B, so I said, well, yeah, obviously, you know, I smoked it. I've been to prison and just told the truth. And Charles Clark said, well, yes, I smoked it when I was in America. I was a student. I went to America and I tried it. And then the Lib Dem guy said, oh, yes, I tried it. You know, and the Green guy said, oh, yes, I smoked it. And the Conservative guy said, oh, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, how times change, because those same parties, they won't stand by their previous consumption, yet the Conservatives at the minute, it's almost a badge of honour that they're like, oh, well, I tried a bit of coke in university.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean? It's become a running joke with them. And it's what you speak of there is same with kind of the opposite effect that came with the positivity of opening the first coffee shops, is a kind of placation. People kind of go, oh, it's over, done.
Absolutely.
So they see that first kind of domino fall, and they assume that the rest of them will be knocked over, so they walk away. And the few that are left as the fringe people going, it's not done yet, it's not done, and they're like, I'm smoking a joint, aren't I? And,
absolutely.
And that's where that's manifested every...
Well put.
About every 8 years or so in the UK, there's been a good move of people that have gone this, and then the government kind of goes, give them that crumb and watch what happens. And we've won the biggest crumb recently, obviously in 2018 with medical cannabis, so-called medical cannabis, and that's placated a lot of people. So thousands of people have gone, oh wait, I can get this piece of paper, I can afford the privilege of this, so I'm protected. So it's disempowering. They're slowly picking people out, going, you CBD, right, get out of that pile. Your hemp, get out of that pile. And they're trying to leave us with just the vanguard and the veterans like yourselves, and then the young bucks, I suppose, like myself, that have come on in more recent days, and are trying to push still that same narrative that it doesn't matter if you give us medical or if you give us CBD. We want the whole thing. We want the right to grow it and the right to celebrate our heritage and our culture. And an acknowledgement that what you have done has been prejudicial. You've stigmatized us. You've persecuted us, and you've set us back for decades as individuals.
Well, to go back to 2009, Gordon Brown called cannabis lethal. Lethal.
Lethal.
And how could you use that for cannabis? Lethal. You couldn't.
And Tony Blair said he was scared of it.
Yeah.
And his father-in-law took it medicinally.
There was so much reefer madness going about, getting revamped all the time. I mean, I've seen some reefer madness just lately with these children supposed to have taken sweets that contain cat. It's been all over the news, and I've been trying to ignore it as much as I can because it's demonized. Well, a friend of mine saw a reputable platform on Facebook today where one of the chaps who found these 4 school children turned around and he said, well, I've seen people on cannabis, they look like they're on spice. So, you know, this would make more sense of, you know.
Massively, but that's the conflation. I mean, just up here in Newcastle, just around the corner, 3 people died the other day from spice. So they've arrested 11 people. There's one guy who's potentially going to be looking at 3 manslaughter charges. And I'm not excusing the behaviour or whatever else, but people deal for whatever reasons they deal. One of the predominant reasons is supply and demand. regardless of whether they want or need the money as excess, whether it's them chasing another Rolex or it's them putting food on the dinner table. The mechanism is in place. So what we need to do is reduce the potential harm of that. That person may very well have just bought from another supplier, and because of the nature of spice, dependent on the amount that's saturated onto the product, however they've presented it, it can be lethal. And the way the radio's talking about it up here is going, 3 people have died from synthetic cannabis.
Yes, that's right. Tie the cannabis name to it, synthetic cannabis, whereas it's not. It's just a synthetic that's taken, modelled on a cannabinoid profile, I believe.
Yeah, well,
that's just
the
marketing ploy.
Entirely. They're winning. Yeah. They're trying to smooth out the language of it. So they're going, hemp, that's the industrial stuff. So you're allowed this for graphene and building materials, etc.
Which it's all cannabis sativa, as we know.
Yeah. And then you're allowed. They're saying medical. When we prescribe it, it's okay and it's safe. And then they're leaving the rest of it to muddy the waters. So they're then going, if you don't fit in one of these pre-approved avenues and you're not going to pursue that, then you're a criminal and you're choosing that. And I think that's a powerful narrative that they're trying to do. So if it's medical cannabis, you're fine. If it's cannabis, ooh. So they're trying to associate this, and we know already the very first synthetic compound that became known as spice was produced by Pfizer. It was a research chemical as an attempt for them to start to patent nature. I mean, CBD, I think, was the first stabilized cannabinoid in nature in 1920s. I think it was the first stumbled across that, and they didn't quite know what they were looking at. And
yeah, that's right.
And then go forward 30, 40 years, and the pharmaceutical companies knew about these compounds because obviously they had access to the academic research, and they were trying to mimic them long before we even knew about the endocannabinoid system. It was 73, 74, something like that. Pfizer created this first batch of synthetic cannabinoids, and then it very quickly found itself onto the street. But it was a smart drug. Do you know, the same way it was all these legal highs were marketed? So because it was put as like an experimental thing, only the psychonauts, or the people that really like to just go, what does this do? They dealt with it. It wasn't really dealt because there was no value in it. There was no intrinsic value. Then when they clamped down and started getting rid of all of the compounds that were sold in the head shops, that's when the prevalence of it started to come up. And then as soon as they criminalized it with the psychoactive drugs bill in 2017 under Theresa May, they basically quadrupled the price overnight. There were people that had they had like not even kilos. I can't think of what the unit measurement is in a liquid. Like the mass volumes, liters, or gallons, large volume of it. Do you know what I mean? And what then happened is that then made its way into the black market. So now there's children's pictures that kids have drawn that are then dipped in it to be snuck into prison. So then what they do is you rip off a piece and you sell the piece, and that goes into a rolled up cigarette or goes into like a dried kettle, and you use the heater filament to then huff on it. They created that problem. All of that was created by their attempt their greed and desire to control nature. You see Tony Blair scared of cannabis? I think very true. In the same way that you hear them talk about protecting their economy, he's scared of what it'll do to their economy and what it would do to their control on society. Because if all of a sudden, it's the joke that Bill Hicks makes about smoking cannabis. Smoking cannabis doesn't make you lazy. It just makes you realize that half the shit you do isn't worth it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the mechanism they're terrified of. All of the citizens, millions of people going, I don't need to work 50 hours a week to have an extra size house. I'm going to downgrade, live somewhere nice, have nice neighbors, work part-time, and engage in a better life. That's not good for and conducive for their economy. That's not going to help prop up their investments. So it's the consequences, the social consequences, as to why cannabis and especially psychedelics are demonized. I mean, I said this with Tommy Chong on the podcast the other day, that we're kind of living in the new 60s. All of this fervor around research with psychedelics, social movements around, say, Black Lives Matter, around social justice. There's conversations going on about social equity within, say, cannabis industry. You've got the medicinalization, like I said, of psychedelic compounds. All of these things mirror in some way conversations that were happening in the 60s. And it's interesting that rather than the international authorities responding with responding aggressively and going, let's stamp this out, they're kind of going to co-opt it, and they're going, all right, well then we'll just sell them it. We then create restrictions through legal ends that then they can go, all right, you can have your cannabis, but it's got 10% THC in it. You can have your concentrate, but it's only allowed 30% in it. And we're in that interesting time that you guys fought in a time where they were like, no. Now we're fighting at a time to just have our seat at the table that they've already set.
That's right.
But it's as you say, we don't have that platform because every part of it has been co-opted at some point. I call it the medical cannabis industrial complex, because it's the best way to kind of term what they've weaponized this into. It's law, it's insurance, it's investment. There's so many facets to this that people are just not aware of, that are all being conglomerated and sort of congealed together into this one super industry, and the power that they have as a lobbying force is fucking phenomenal. I mean, unbelievably phenomenal. And then you look at the patents and the research that they have for using cannabinoids to treat things like schizophrenia, things like causing. They actually have GW has a patent for causing apoptosis in cancer cells through the application of a couple of cannabinoid combinations. They've had that. Right. They've had that for like 12 odd years. So they're trying to tie all this together. So whenever anyone arises of any integrity or any true knowledge within the so-called recreational movement, they get headhunted and pulled off. And they go, oh, come join us for the hemp fight. Oh, come join us for the CBD fight. And I don't blame anybody for doing it, but it's so fractured these days. You guys with the Legalized Cannabis Alliance, it's pretty obvious what you wanted with that. Now it's we're the Medical Cannabis Authoritative Board, or we're the we're the Hemp Association, or this, or we're the CBD industry. And it's what you can't create pockets of industry while the entirety of the plant remains illegal.
Yeah, that's very.
I used to talk about campaigning again. I used to talk about pushing a car up a hill, and we used to. So you want to push this car to the top of the hill. So you get a group of people to start pushing the car. The top of the hill, of course, being full cannabis breeding, and so we're pushing the car up the hill, and there's a lot of people sitting on the walls on the sideline clapping. But there's a few people pushing the car. We are slowly moving the car. And then we get a flat bit. And it's easier pushing the car. It's called declassification, reclassification. It's now Class C. It's a flat bit of a road. So we don't need so many people pushing the car. But a few keep pushing it, But more people are clapping, less people are pushing. And eventually, you look around and there's only two of you still pushing the car, and you reach a hilly bit again, so you struggle to push the car up the hill, and suddenly it goes backwards. It goes backwards across the flat bit, backwards down the hill, and the car's at the bottom of the hill again. Oh, we're back in Class B, So what are we going to do? We're going to push the car up the hill again. Yeah, but they've built obstacles in the road. But we have to push it around, or we have to push it over. There's a little turn off now. There's a little turn off on the road. It says prescriptions. Oh, we can go down that way. Prescriptions. Well, one thing, it's a dead end. You will never get to the top of the hill through prescriptions. Another road is spice, legal highs. You'll never get to the top of the hill through legal highs. They talk about gateways, to hard drugs. They're not the problem. The problem is the obstacles and the sidetracks that they've put in the way. So now very few people actually believe that we will ever get the car to the top of the hill. And people, I see all the time on Facebook, they'll never legalize cannabis. And I always say, well, never's a long time. But they will one day have to legalize it. They will have to allow it because it cannot be stopped. All they've got to do, and I'm sorry to say this, but we've almost got to help to persuade them, that if they legalize it, they'll make money out of it.
They're already very much aware of I suppose the difference is almost that in your day, say just 20 years ago, legalize meant something different than it meant now because it was conceptual. Nowhere had done it yet. We hadn't seen a corporate takeover. We hadn't seen neoliberalistic capitalism show what it will do under legalization. So when we hear the word, especially the older generation, legalize means the end of the war. Whereas freedom. Whereas what they've actually done now is legalization is will allow
control.
for more control, but it means that we'll profit from you, put more restrictions on you, and as we've seen in Canada, create more nuanced laws to criminalize you.
Yeah.
So
Prohibition 2.
Exactly, Prohibition 2.0. So it's an interesting point that it's not a case of just convincing the people to, air quotes, legalize anymore, because there's a big bunch of people that want to legalize that are either still using that old interpretation of the word, or are actually just going, I just want to get my ounce and I'm fine. That's enough for them. And they're kind of being short-sighted in the sense that they don't see that we all deserve freedom. The door shouldn't be open to crack for a few to get through. It should be kicked off its goddamn hinges. Yeah. And that's where we're kind of at the minute. It's getting the consensus on which direction to go in. I mean, I got thrown in a call. I don't know how much I'm supposed to reveal of this. I'll not mention any names. I got thrown in a three-hour conference call at the last minute today, with basically two not competing but built and very well established bodies that are working in the UK. Basically, they're going to come together and work together moving sort of forward. And the main conversations in that were people trying to go, well, we're medical and no, but we're hemp. And they go, well, then where's my point of being there? And the reason I'm always a pain in people's arses is screaming the whole time, well, where's the adult consumer? We're the vast majority. We will be the most profitable aspect of this. And you cannot have any form of an industry without this. They're now starting to take serious to be able to create a caveat. So they will, in these, I wish I could name them, but I can't, these bodies as they come into fruition over the next few weeks and months, they will put in a contingent for this adult consumer. So there will be representation within that. Once that happens, those bodies will actually have everything. So that will be CBD, so-called medical, hemp, and the recreational all in one. So finally, we will have one body fighting for cannabis sativa L. They're not breaking it into nuance of drug over here or this over there. They've got individual branches within it that are going to rally and lobby in different ways. But the idea of the consensus of the body is that everybody actually listens to each other. So they're not going to pursue a hemp project that will stigmatize and demonize recreational. They're not going to pursue CBD that will then put down medical, etc. It's all in the consensus to move forward collectively together. So there is that sort of little bit of hope. Obviously, I've been trying to do the same thing that sort of you guys were doing with the LCA, and that is get that political voice. Because it's huge at the minute. You look at the PCC elections, you look at the local elections, the number of independents and the sheer number of the PCCs, the Police Crime Commissioner candidates that are like, yeah, we want to see it decriminalised. We want to see something be allowed to happen. One of the projects I've been pushing for heavily recently with the various organisations that I speak with is a trial scheme, is a discretion in policy that basically the Home Office kind of goes, we're not going to touch that in a certain area. With the de facto decriminalisation of the police in that region, clubs could exist, work out testing so that they can get a data set of what's on the street. Because at the minute, what they're saying that skunk, street weed, is addictive and causes psychosis. Yet the conversations I've had with the medical professionals and the people in the medical cannabis industrial complex, they're not worried about psychosis. There is not one prescribing doctor that is talking to their patient about psychosis as a side effect. They're not talking about addiction. They're not talking about the narrative that they're presenting. So the further they diverge from each other, and the less that they divulge to each other, they're creating these islands of knowledge that are actually going to lead us further away from that end goal. And the way to do that and to bring them all together is that kind of political party. And so I think that there is this real renaissance within that idea that we deserve a voice, because it's not just about I want to buy some flavors and roll a fat joint and get high. It's literally, we're at the point of a climate crisis. We can sequester 325 kilograms per atmospheric ton of grown per acre, of cannabis. You know, we look at the bio properties of it for ethanol. We look at it for plastic alternatives. You know what I mean? We look at it as a cotton alternative. All of these things can greatly help these other catastrophic potential consequences of this same neoliberalistic capitalist machine that's trying to take over and co-opt these various pursuits. I mean, look at what they're doing with the recreational cannabis in America. It's all grown under lights in these huge facilities, and the vast majority of them, the carbon footprint that they put out is astronomical. They've taken the best carbon sequester resource that we have and found a way to make it a carbon pollutant. They're not taking the spectrum of this into consideration. So I'm hoping that the bodies that I've been talking with recently, that as they move forward with this, there will be, like I said, this appetite to connect with these people that want to do exactly what the LCA did and stand in every local election, try to get representative within council, because more people than ever know about the therapeutic benefits. few know about the potential technological benefits, especially things like graphene. You know, I mean, we are literally looking our future in the face, but we are still buried under 100 years of propaganda and lies.
That's right.
That's really what the Green Party should be doing.
I couldn't agree. I have a certain umbrage with the Green Party. They've become quite soft in some ways with their approach to this. Their language in their manifesto states that they wanted originally to support decriminalisation to create clubs. Now it's moved on to sort of social spaces because the idea of a club is so loosely defined now within the UK. But they are looking to try to back something like that. I obviously speak quite intimately with the Green Party working Green Party Drugs Policy Group, and I'm trying to get them to push for beyond decriminalisation because the police in themselves can enforce that now. They are a political party that should be putting pressure on Parliament to address the discrepancies in law here.
Yeah.
And so I think that the PCC elections, especially if you get someone like Cleo Lake in Avon and Somerset and Bristol elected, she'll do some damage. She will really do some damage, and she will bring forth the conversation about racism, about classism, and hopefully then we'll get this narrative of going, yes, we should legalise in some form or allow some legal system, but we cannot allow that to further impoverish communities. Because if we allow the Tilrays, the Auroras, and everyone else to come and supply these flowers, they're going to take all that money that they're making and it disappears out of this country. It impoverishes the neighbourhoods that now, I mean, I live in Durham. Back there is one of the worst streets in County Durham. Durham is the third most impoverished region in Northern Europe. We have currently, I think it's 8 out of 10 in the UK at the minute as a consequence of austerity. These people who deal out there that have their economy, they're putting literally food on the table for their kids. They're putting clothes on their backs. They keep this economy flowing. If you took drugs out of this equation, people would literally starve. So if their version of legalization is to lock these people out, further criminalize them, or say that the only way you're going to access this is if you buy it from us, means that you're going to take money out of their economy. It's not going to go to Dave, who's then shot in a few eights, you know what I mean? So he's got a bit himself and he can put money in the electric meter. And those are the conversations that need to be had. It's all well and good, the hemp sector, the CBD sector, and whoever else trying to have these conversations. But if we don't talk about the millions of people at the end of this, then this is just another capitalist trick. It's a co-option rather than a war. They're not going to end the war on drugs. They'll just find a new way to fight it. It's a new way to suppress us, a new way to control us. And this time, that's
why I push for grow your own and organically if you can get away with it. That's the baseline. When I noticed when I was doing the coffee shops, one of the problems I had, though we managed to get 11 on the menu per day at certain times, was sourcing good herb. And so if people were growing their own, we got a lot of growers around there who helped us out. They wanted to do what we were doing, and we was helping them as well. And that to me would create an economy by all these coffee shops where you could swap stuff, learn about the plant, learn the herbal qualities of it, etc. The Jack era dream, rather than me going to a long waffle about it. And it's within grasp. With all this that's gone out with the COVID, you know, we should be pushing the home growers. We shouldn't be wanting to interact so much. So why not allow home growing? Because people don't want to be taking the drug alcohol all the time. I mean, there's been moans about people taking too much of it during the lockdown, and I'm sure that the drug nicotine as well would have suffered a hammering as well, because people get more nervous about the illness, etc. We all get a bit neurotic about things, and that's one of the drugs that I used to take many years ago. And if I was nervous, I often be nervous about trying to give it up sometimes. But I'm glad I've given it up now since 2004, so I'm pleased with myself. And I've given up alcohol now for coming up 20 years. So August the 17th, but I'm not counting. So, you know, it's to me, cannabis has helped me move on from that. It's a therapeutic. And also I had a lot of extreme drug use when I was younger, especially with alcohol, but with other stuff as well, opiates, legal and illegal, and various other things that was extreme. So I ended up getting onto cannabis as a replacement for all those, including tranquilizers that they gave me because my mother died of a drug overdose when I was 10, and that opened my eyes to the drug culture big style. It was barbiturates, amphetamine, and the drug alcohol. And that's why I'm always prefixing alcohol with the word drug, because I get fed up of people not labeling it like that with the drug nicotine, because really in the Misuse of Drugs Act, they left out the two, if the word misuse can go to people experimenting with drugs, but the two overused drugs in the system because they're promoted, which is alcohol and nicotine. You know, and to me, well, let's get a recreational drug out there, if we're going to call it recreational, because to me, it's just a plant we should all be growing. It should be in our medicine cupboard. If we're going to get it out there, well, you know, just all be able to grow it. I lost my track there. I forgot where I was going. Right, normal step waffle.
But you raise some valid sort of points there. I mean, it's the point that I often bring up to people is that it's the end use of it. You grow that plant, and it's a plant until you decide what you want to do with it. You can then create biomass out of it with all the flowers and everything all in one go, right? You don't. Absolutely. You can then choose to extract the resin from it and produce oils. You can choose to then make those into extracts like shatter or waxes or whatever. You can then make it through into hashes and produce and make pollen, etc. You can do so much with it. You can then, like I say, use the physical material of it. It's not until the intention of it that then it needs regulation. The plant itself, you can't demonize. I mean, Jesus, it was 71 when we started global eradication of it, and you can plot on the global temperatures the tick of it. Every year that we have a good year on the war on drugs, where they eradicate more native crops around the world, climate goes up and up and up and up. Same with the carbon levels, because we lose, apart from bamboo, our second best, we know it's our best actually, carbon sequestering natural technology on the planet. You know what I mean? So once we start losing that, we lose it from the potential of technology. I mean, remember the first car that Henry Ford designed was soybean, flax, and cannabis body instead of an iron and steel, and the engine was Rudolf Diesel's European diesel engine, which was going to run on hemp seed oil. They were looking with hemp seed oil, bioethanols, and sunflower oil. They were being really goddamn smart with what they were looking at. He fell off the back of a boat going from Germany to the UK for the Diesel Unification Conference. I can't remember what year it was. His clothes, everything was found in his cabin. Never heard from him again. That patent was then absolved through somebody else, and that technology just disappeared. Next thing you know, it's crude oil that is then ran into what we then became as the modern diesel engine. But yes, it's mental. So we've known about those technologies and that potential, and so that's one avenue by which to suppress this. Another avenue is racism and is classism and is nationalism and is just bigotry. The general kind of, that can't be a medicine, it's not a pill. Do you know what I mean? The demonization of the other. And then another part of it is social control, as we've spoke of. The same with the Nixon quote, the John Ehrlichman, who was Nixon's advisor, and he spoke of associating the black population with heroin, and with the hippies and the anti-war left with cannabis. They could then demonize them, raid their homes, break up their community meetings, and stop them basically having a voice and an impact. That mechanism is still strongly in place today to prevent us doing it. But what happens now, instead of them using criminalization, they're using co-option. They're using astroturfing, which is what we saw with the medical cannabis campaign. That then started as something of innocence, where we were stood outside Parliament. I remember us embracing quite happily Winston and having a good smoke outside. And we were there with plants and all sorts and going, grow your own. They're fighting for us in that
Yes,
hall.
we were.
And they didn't. It came out, what they said were they going in versus what came out was entirely different, was a betrayal to us. It set the scene for what we're seeing now, which is the medical cannabis industrial complex taking over everything. They've hijacked the campaign, as they often do, like they did with GW Pharmaceutical originally. They went along with it and helped us, I believe, get the regrading, because when cannabis moved from B to C, oil then, which was the component of their Sativex they're going to work with, also moved from A to C. Yeah. And then when it moved back, they just moved back to B, so they could still experiment on it because they'd already got their experimental licenses. Yeah. Well, that was what the 2001 misuse of drug regulations was about. Is that they created a mechanism in that meant, previous to that, under the MODA, it was illegal to research or then ultimately create a prescribable product or create a research I'm tripping on my words. Research with the site to create a medicine. So in the 2001 regulations, that's basically all it does, is it allows Schedule 1 products that have no accepted medicinal value to be produced into medical drugs. That's all that
magic.
Magic. It's literally it goes in this, and that's why you grow cannabis over here as Schedule 1 Misuse of Drugs Act 1971. You put it into this little legislation, and it pops out medical cannabis Schedule 2, prescribable drug.
Yeah.
As long as you don't set it on fire and smoke it, you can do what you like with it. It's mental, but it shows that that's what they've done to sort of disempower. So they started that. At the same time, they then ramped it up on you. They realised, we've gone too soft. All these coffee shops popping up. There's people smoking it in parks. All these liberal attitudes. We can't have this. And we know that Labour wasn't Labour under Blair or Brown. Brown was a bit more to the left than Tony, clearly. But he literally betrayed the idea of an entire generation because it was entirely to get votes that they bumped it back up. It was he could look strong on drugs. They could tackle this new sort of wave that we saw of this open cannabis culture. That for the first time in a generation, people were openly smoking. People before would literally spray themselves to go back in the house. You know, they'd be chewing gum, swilling with mouthwash, etc. They'd be hiding it from everybody. And this then created that space. And then that led to the adoption of head shops all over the place, which then led into sort of legal highs. And you can see that, again, where they've tried to squash one thing, they've created another goddamn problem. Then they've tried to squash it with the psychoactive bill. And again, the same thing happened with the 71 with Moda. They went, all right, let's remove tobacco, alcohol, chocolate, because I can't remember the drug that's in chocolate, but that's psychoactive. So
Bromine.
That one. They put a list of it together and they kind of went, right, there you go. Anything else psychoactive, gone. And they put a caveat in that said that any new compound that's developed that's psychoactive will instantly be banned unless it can prove efficacy. So even things like, obviously yourself, you speak of the dangers of alcohol. I mean, I myself reiterate the World Health Organization's own statistic. 5% of all global deaths are directly attributable to alcohol consumption. 1 in 20 people that dies ever, anywhere in the world, it's down to alcohol consumption. It's comorbid to it. It's crazy. But then David Nutt came along and went, all right, Alcosynth. We've got a way to create a synthetic alcohol that can create an intoxicant that actually is far less damaging to the liver, doesn't really cause as much... it's called neural retardation, but it's a horrible way of describing it in that sense. But it's slowing the brain, so it actually allows you to be intoxicated but not have as many of the physiological and neurological
That's
detriments.
right, yes. I heard
and then
about
under the legislation, he would be banned immediately from bringing that to market. So they're hampered from researching to develop that. And even if they then did, the size of the lobbying of alcohol... They'd block this in the same way tobacco have gone after vape for the past 15 years until they went, let's just buy it. And that's exactly what's happened in Canada with cannabis. It's alcohol and tobacco. In 2019, when we looked at who's the big investors from it, it's the same investors that own alcohol and tobacco industry. You've now got Philip Morris and British American Tobacco and all of these companies suddenly going, I mean, what was British American Tobacco? They're creating non-nicotine consumables, I think was the language that they used, which is them trying to go cannabis without saying cannabis. Do you know what I mean? Without scaring too many of the traditional investors. And you look at, I think it's 9 out of 10 now of the biggest beer brewers that are all in billions, have invested billions each into this. The spirit producers as well, the conglomerates, they've all backed into this because they're trying to get drinkable cannabis. So it's huge in Canada at the minute. They're really pushing it into the market massively because of the investment. It's as I always talk about, the paradigm of the big fish eating the little fish. That Canada is emblematic of this. They are just eating each other alive with all of these trade deals, with all of these buyouts and mergers. And they're now starting to reach out into, they say, like garden centres and other things like that as a way to sort of exert their power and their control so that they can then control all distribution. If you then control the genetics that are out there, if you control the equipment and how accessible that is, you can then prevent people from home grow, therefore push them more into this system. You then get to use all your legal cash to go to your mates in the parliament over there and go, all these home growers in this illegal market, this black market is causing so much trouble. And you get a further demonizement. You get to use the money from legally selling cannabis to destroy the lives of them. And look at what happened in Canada when they changed the law. 1 seed is equal to 1 gram of cannabis. So over-possession in Canada is 30 grams. You walk down the street with 31 fucking seeds and you commit another crime in conjunction with this. I don't know if Canada has jaywalking, but something similar like that. You could potentially, exacerbates the nature of the crime, you could face 5 years in prison for that. For having 31 fucking seeds going down the street. Because they're trying to put limitations. They're trying to create this. There's also been plans that were put in place, I believe, in one of the lower pages of the Cannabis Act for basically controlling the genetics that are available. So there's already a few companies that have been working closely with the Canadian government to profile them. And what these companies are now doing is they're labeling them, B679524. And they're removing that genetic. And then they're then doing experimentation on it. They're then breaking the genome of these things so that they can then profile they're calling them chemovars. So we've gone from strains to cultivars to these chemovars, however you pronounce it. Yeah. And there's now companies that are growing from stem cell plants. So the industry is trying to remove, with synthetic cannabinoids as well, they're trying to remove the plant. So they can leave the plant as Schedule 171. So we will always be criminals, always. Yeah. And they will use the excuse of tobacco is harmful to lungs, so ergo you shouldn't be allowed to smoke cannabis. You can drink it in this format here, and we've already got the harm prevention spaces for that in pubs and nightclubs. Do you know what I mean? They're already working on it. They're just
it's just the logic there. Tobacco's bad for lungs. You can have the tobacco. They don't worry about that.
Because it's smoking. But it's smoking and smoking. It's paradoxical. But the reason
smoking is one of the best delivery systems that I can use. One of the quickest when I've been fighting spinal pain. I've had 2 spinal operations as well, and it's got me about doing lots of things. So I know what the medical benefits, but initially I fought for the recreational side because I could see what the trading could do it from the ground up. And we need to incorporate it. I think it was Tim Healy said the other day that these shops should be brought up, these cannabis clubs should be taken from the community up, with people being allowed to congregate and meet, swap plants, talk about the benefits of it, and we can even give it symbiotically back to the research as well of the benefits we get from various strains or chemovars or whatever they want to label it as these days, as they're trying to get into measure each single cannabinoid. I want the entourage effect, and that's all I do want. That's the one that's got me through. I mean, I was 16 when I fractured my spine. I've had 2 operations. I was told that there was nothing wrong with my spine for 9 years until I demanded an x-ray and then found it was an old fracture, which I went, well, I'm not mad at that point, am I? I was kept coming. So, I mean, I've been using cannabis from about the age of 23, about 21. It was 23 that I realized it was good for my spine. And I got into the campaign by getting online and reading people like Rob Free Cannabis, the UK CIA or whatever they call it. There were loads of people out there that were talking that same language about changing it. And we was nearly there changing it. But somehow it all got dragged away again. And with propaganda, that tool, they use fear to control us and propaganda to keep us down. And I get a bit, angry at that.
You guys might be able to help me out with something here. When did skunk become a thing, like the term of skunk? Because obviously if we know the story of then Sam the Skunk Man in GW, Jeffrey Guy,
that's true.
And then so skunk number 1 is the main cultivar used in Sativex. So then at the same time that they're literally making the profits off skunk number 1, they're demonizing this street weed of skunk. I mean, I found out recently there's a couple of very notorious enemies of us that work within this industry that were paid opposition for GW writing in mainstream press. They were part of the people promulgating and perpetuating these ideas and these concepts of psychosis, of addiction, talking about the schizophrenia link that isn't there and has been long since dealt with.
Yeah.
And they perpetuate this to keep the public on, and allowing GW to continue that cartel, that monopoly on this. Because if you look at what we know from the Royal Commission started in 96. Philip Robson disappeared off and went and looked at all this stuff off the back of California going, let's kickstart this thing. Obviously, it started in Illinois way back when in the 70s, but it really got started in California in the mid-90s. So then we went, oh shit, we better look at this. Sent some people, went and looked at everything, correlated all this information, came back and went, we should decriminalize, we should do research, and we should create a medical sector around this. That then got shelved and hidden in some psychiatric report, was never really published and made public, or published in any mainstream publication at all. And then GW forms 4 months later. then a license appears, then everything changes for them all incrementally along the goddamn way. You can plot this back, and it looks quite easy when you look at it retrospectively, as we're seeking to do this evening, and look at it, and you can see what's happened there. So you can see then at 2001, when you guys suddenly were like, oh, this, and with the coffee shops and everything, there's a big flourish of movement, was exactly when they got the law change to create that network. So I guarantee you that wasn't just them going on a whim. That was stage one. We're now stage 4. Yeah. We're end stage in a lot of ways for people like Jeffrey Guy, who's kind of gone 63 million out of, what was it? It was sold for 5 billion. He made 64 million personal cut. You know what I mean?
It's on the stock market in America now. It's been engrossed by the rest of the world. England, who has been dealing using Sativex all the way through, trying to find a use for Epidox, but they found one just lately. And the whole thing has been contrived to let the pharmaceutical market. Well, one thing, when the pharmacy get hold of a plant, or this is in general terms, the last thing they want to use is the name of the plant, because they don't want people taking and making their own medicine. And as Culpeper said, this plant it's too numerous for you. You can get an oil extraction. You haven't got to use all the clever stuff they use these days. You can just put it in oil or olive oil, hemp oil, and leave it for 3 months of bud. So you make it 3 months in advance. So there's no heavy chemical extractions, and probably get a better terpene profile out of it as well, because they keep labeling all the terpenes and the flavonoids and all the various components, 147 cannabinoids. I keep trying to keep up with it all, but how's it all real when I just want the whole plant?
But it's they're kind of missing the point, right? So it's like quantum physics at the minute. So they went, right, atom, fuck all beyond an atom. We're cool with that. We figured out the universe. We're quite happy. Einstein comes along and got, ooh. Then we looked inside that and we found, I can't remember what it is. Quarks. And then I think we're down to is it subquasarks? I think was the latest one that we've come up. And then there's a team of researchers. Literally, that paper came out, and a team of researchers came out the next week and went, we're theorizing, and it's just endless. It's like a Russian doll thing that we will continue because of the multi-faceted and complex nature of this goddamn thing. And then when you consider again why they're trying to go down these chemovar routes, is you grow one plant, it hermaphrodizes, it self-pollinates. Each one of those seeds is going to give you a slight variance. Do you know what I mean? And then me and all three of us sit and we consume the exact same cultivar, and it's going to affect us in different ways because of the makeup of our endocannabinoid system, because of the nuances of whether we've eaten or not, where our metabolism's at, so many different things. So it doesn't fit into their pharmacological model. So this is why they've kind of gone, now right, shit, we can't give them flower because then it's just too broad and we give them access themselves. Right, we'll break down the cannabinoids. Okay, you've been doing that since the 70s, and actually what you found in your own clinical trials is these things are potentially dangerous. You've then allowed them to leach onto the street. You've then basically created an industry where you go, oh, that one's illegal. Change the oxygen molecule on that. Boom, get that out there. Boom. And so you lost even the research. That's been going a long time. Yeah, so that's when led to the psychoactive ban in 2017. But now you're at a point where the development of these things are not done in labs anymore. These are real sort of, I hate the expression of ghetto operations, but they're really makeshift, throw together labs. These are not people who are actually interested in the molecules or whatever and the potential consequence of this. They're just going to try and obfuscate and get around rules and legislations. And the same is happening in the academic and the pharmacological circles with their compounds they're creating. Epidiolex has a strawberry flavoring to make it more palatable to children that has associations to neurological neurological decline. We had Lisa Querel with a Q there, on the podcast the other day, and she was talking about how her child basically went into some sort of relapsed state, having to then take this. If we then look at other prominent activist children who have then taken this drug as well and had serious, very public downfalls on this.
No THC in it, full entourage.
They've got FSA approval. In America, at the height of COVID, GW got approval to deschedule Epidiolex. It's not a scheduled drug in the States. So not only did they get the first FDA approval, they managed to then get it removed from the scheduling system altogether. It shows the power of the influence that this cartel have created. So I believe now the fact that the Tories are looking to legalise, and the Conservative Drug Policy Reform Group, Voltface, and all these other very conservative organisations are now talking this language and co-opting our words and now going the adult consumer rather than recreational, that are now co-opting and medicinalizing mushrooms and LSD.
Reframing.
Yeah, they're putting it into their camp and then changing the public opinion and then going, who do you want to trust? The criminals and the druggies, or us gentlemen in suits? You know, we work in parliament and business and finance, and we know what we're doing. The same motherfuckers that have voted for decade after decade to destroy our lives, that have demonized us, criminalized us.
Yeah.
It's horrible to me that I often feel like I'm screaming in an screaming into the abyss, that we're missing the point. If we've got medical, if we've got hemp, we've got CBD, we're still missing the fucking point. We're still trying to crack into the atoms and go, you've got cannabis. Just give us fucking cannabis and we'll figure the rest of it as we go.
Yeah, that's what I keep saying. The rest of it can be sorted afterwards. Let's all just go for the same thing.
Yeah.
Whether, what fraction.
There's more knowledge locked in fucking prison cells right now around the world who are cannabis cultivators than there are in all of the labs and all of the grow rooms around the world. I mean, it's ridiculous. It truly is ridiculous when you think of the loss of knowledge, and then when you look at again the whitewashing, the gentrifying of this movement of legalization.
That's what's happening.
They are not representative of us. They have seen the big money, and they know that actually they've learned the mistakes from the various regions. They've watched 17 states now come on board with so-called recreational models, each one tweaking it, and each time they then change their white paper. They then change the published materials out there to adjust so that it's coming through their spectrum. They control the mainstream media in this country, and they control the output, the narrative. So this is why you've got cannabis as a medicine and a lifesaver with pictures of children dying on one page, and on the other you've got these huge vast grows of illegal cannabis robbers stealing the electric and putting evil skunk onto the street.
That's right. It's the way it's portrayed, and we're going to be villainized as much as they can. I mean, that's why I'm glad that people like yourself are putting intelligent material out there to show what people are like who take cannabis. They can have a nice, intelligent waffle, and to break that stereotype that we're a non-thinking crew when we're not. We're considerate. We're aiming for more greener issues than. With the Green Party, we're right on board, because I believe that if people are consuming more of the herb and say more of a few mushrooms and that, then they're thinking more. It's critical thinking. I think it was Dr. Todd McCowry. He turned around and said that why they hadn't legalized cannabis, that was in America then, but they have since, and he died of cancer. He did research about Shaughnessy and all that. Really interesting guy. Was that it creates critical thinking, and they don't want you to think for yourself.
Yeah.
So,
compare your two favorite drugs. I say that ironically, alcohol and cannabis. Alcohol is classified as a neurological retardant. It slows connectivity between neurons in the brain, whereas cannabis causes neurogenesis. It also causes
it grows. They grow neurogenesis.
Yeah, it causes what does it call it? Basically, it allows for novel thoughts as well. So not only does it increase neuron connection, it actually allows for novel new connections. So this is why you end up having these weird thoughts of like, ooh, because your brain is firing and it's more hyperconnective. I suppose is a really poor way of putting the science there. So exactly what you said.
That works.
You don't want they don't want an informed public. If they did, we would have health food fast health food rather than fast food. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
If you were to then look at the wording of the schedule of MODA, alcohol and tobacco would be Schedule 1s. You know what I mean? Sugar would be a schedule drug. We would be having very different conversations in this country.
Absolutely.
But
and
they've managed
a heavy little drug creating diabetes. I mean, Alzheimer's is now being termed as diabetes 3, and we wonder why it's going up. I mean, one hell of an horrible drug. I take it naturally in fruits and try and balance it from there, but I still often fall off the thing and grab a sweet or whatever if there's one about, because it is a very highly addictive drug. I gave it up for a while. I even stopped taking. I stopped taking it. I also stopped nicotine. Nicotine I have done as well, but caffeine for about 6 months, and I found that really long. It was the longest 6 months of my life. I've always been using caffeine since I've been a child, and it is one of those first drugs that we're introduced to. And that, along with sugar, you know, when they had a pot of tea on the table when I was a child, and, you know, it had milk and tea in it. You could pour it and you put a few sugars in. As a child, I was buzzing off of it. That was my introduction to that. Never mind later on when I found out about, you know, sugar itself being an addictive drug that we're throwing into the kids, and the dentists love it these days, don't they? And we are messing up metabolic rates. We're making obesity come. I think it was 1981, when fruit rows from corn flour, corn syrup got thrown into Coca-Cola and products like that. And the obesity crisis started because people were getting addicted to those newer highs of intense sugar. Each one does create a high. That's why they're messing about with the chemical structure of like that, as your chemists do in other areas as well, to bypass laws. But these people, they're looking for the bliss points, they call it. This is all measurable, you know, your sugar eye, your fat eye, your salt eye. It's all measurable. They've been doing it. They know when you go, oh, I'm going to go over the top, but they want to create a craving within us for addictive substances. And I feel that because we critically think that some of these drugs like alcohol, nicotine, etc., dumb us down, including caffeine, which is one of my favorite drugs. So, you know, I've never managed to give that up successfully, but Alun, I think, told me about it. The cells in caffeine aren't good for the brain. Is that right, Alun?
Apparently it makes them go spiky.
Yeah, that's right.
So it affects your short-term memory, your long-term
memory. It was encouraged because of the munitions of repetitive work. The munitions factories is something I've heard en route. I don't know how true it is.
It used to be illegal in Germany in the 19th
right.
century.
Well, it was
coffee.
Well, originally tea was a medicine in China before it was a normal drink that was available to the masses.
Yeah.
So it was registered, and I can't remember what the pharmacological text is, but yeah, it's referenced as a highly medicinal sort of substance. And yeah, the narratives that I have heard in the UK is the reason we have tea breaks and stuff like that is because of the boost. So the sugar
sugar
plus caffeine, is like woofing back to work you go kind of thing. But yeah, I must admit I have a very, very problematic relationship with coffee. That if it was illegal, if coffee was as hard to acquire as heroin, I would be in a very difficult situation because I would still go and score it. I'd be meeting dodgy people down alleyways.
I'd have to.
I thought you were drinking more.
Got any coffee, yes. I've seen sketches on that as well. But, it's very true.
I'd just like to say that although I agree, you know, I think cannabis is a wonderful plant, you know, for all these reasons. I agree with everything that's been said. But there's one thing that's going on at the moment, not just in Britain, but let's just limit it to Britain. Right at this minute, there's probably 1 million or 2 million people smoking cannabis at home. Mm-hmm. And what do they want? What are they doing it for? Why are they doing it? Why are they wasting their money? Why are they wasting their time? Because they want to feel good.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And
that's beneficial.
And they want to be left alone, you know. And the human rights, to bring human rights back into the conversation. I didn't create human rights. I didn't write the laws on human rights. You didn't. Karl Marx didn't. Granny Pat didn't. You know, they were written in 1949, or brought into law internationally. They were written, and if you read the preamble, they were written to stifle the need for revolt and rebellion. So there was a recourse against tyrannical governments and tyrannical laws, laws that aren't justifiable. And what we're talking about is those 1 or 2 million people who are spoken at the moment. There could be a knock on the door, or the door could get kicked in, and they could be arrested. They could be taken to court. They could be criminalized. They could lose their job. If they're growing plants, it could be even worse. I can grow hundreds of different plants. I've got quite a few plants in my house, different plants. I've no idea what it would do to me if I ate it or I smoked it.
Very true.
I've got
very
no
true.
idea. But if I've got that one plant, which I know if I grow it and I smoke it or I eat it, it makes me feel good. And after 50 years of smoking, I think it's fair to say it's not going to do me any harm, you know.
It's not.
And yet I can be busted for it in the privacy of my own home. And human rights law is quite specific about a private life and about your freedom to practice your religion or belief alone or with others. So if you believe that cannabis is beneficial to you and you want to share it, you know, there's not a right, there's no right to grow cannabis or right to smoke cannabis or right to share cannabis. The right is to a private life. The right is to a belief. And it says in the law, in order for the authorities to interfere with those rights, it has to be, one, against the law. What you're doing is got to be against the law, right? But the next word is and, not or, but and. So it's got to be against the law and a threat or risk to public health, to public order, to national security, or to the rights of other people. Now, I can smoke myself silly on tobacco till I die. I can drink as much alcohol as I want. I could smash my house up. I could break things. I could punch myself in the face. As long as I'm not a threat to public health or public order, if I'm loud and I make a noise and I annoy the neighbours or people outside hear me and they're frightened, then the police can come round, you know. But if you're not annoying anybody or putting anybody at risk, you know, you can drink yourself silly. You can eat as many sweets as you want. You can get as fat as you like. You know, you can burn barbecues. You know, you can eat.
We should have the human rights to be able to take cannabis. It's bollocks stopping us.
You can grow deadly nightshade. You can grow whatever you want.
Belladonna. Yeah, I know my herbs and all that.
But you cannot grow cannabis.
I'm growing opium poppies all over my garden. And, you know, you're allowed to because of the Opium Wars, Brian English, etc., who wrote that book about it, and because the laws weren't prejudiced against opium because we were selling it to the Chinese. That's where we got Hong Kong from and all that. We had to get it back, give it back from Patton and £6 million because we were forcing them to take opium. And, you know, we're well known.
Because we wanted tea.
Yeah, exactly.
We wanted Chinese tea and they wanted opium from India.
Drug wars, and then we went into India and tried to then control the cannabis trade, and that's when we started. The very first steps of this was the time of William O'Shaughnessy and the many academics and elite individuals that went out to the colonies to study these novel new things. And so that kind of started this legacy, and ever since then, everything that's been built, as we discussed before, around the same time that they internationally criminalized opium, was when they'd figured out the way to internationalize the trade on it. Any of these drug wars, any of these legislations since the formation of even the League of Nations, has always been about control. They've never really wanted things eradicated. Even their pledge they made in '61 to be like, by '87 or whatever it was, we'll have a drug-free world. They didn't fucking believe that. They couldn't have believed that.
No. That's fear is the tool they use to control you, I think, is the Cottonmouth Kings that sing it in the song Reefer Madness, a little favourite of mine. And that is what these laws don't make sense. You've got CDI Future and WTU and all that asking for proof about how they've come to these conclusions. And, you know, reefer madness is now, as I term, as THC madness, because that's the only cannabinoid they can say anything bad about. But what can they really say bad about it? Maybe one person, it wouldn't create psychosis. I have to be careful with that when I used to say sarcosis. I thought it was sarcastic the way they said it. One person, it can only affect one person 23 to 25,000 that's already had a psychotic episode, and if it is, it's going to be like a heavy caffeine rush, and we all know it's like get the jitters after too much caffeine and give it all that.
And then what they're going to do? They're going to arrest them because the cannabis made them psychotic. Are they going to arrest them? Or are they going to?
We have people getting pissed and fighting and being. We don't. It's acceptable. It's double standards.
Well, look at the law on it. You are arrested for being drunk and disorderly. You're not arrested for being drunk. And again, drunk is another wonderful co-option that they've got, because you get high on alcohol. Drunk is another word that they've managed to go, oh, drunk over here, you get high on drugs, and it's bad to get high. And some in me still feels
separatist demonizing wording. Separatist demonizing wording.
It feels like coming from the sort of fundamental Christian lobby. It feels like high means to connect, to get up high. And you're not allowed that. I mean, we know that some of the earliest prohibition is the Catholic Church into Ireland prohibiting them from eating mushrooms. And the statement was basically that you cannot access God.
Just going to put the light on.
No worries. You can only access God through the church. And so that's part of the argument now, is the moralizing argument of this. They keep it because it's wrong to be high almost. The illusion of it, you can't be high. High is bad, and they don't explain why.
Alexa,
why is being high bad?
But they used to use the term high for being drunk as well. In America, are you high on drink? But like you say,
and yet, if you didn't get high off of theobromine, you wouldn't take chocolate, would you? And the phenylene and a few other chemicals that you get out of this high, including caffeine. So, I mean, when you take chocolate, the high's what attracts you to it. So why is high suddenly demonized when you get high?
Almost everything in life is about getting high.
Anything's just psychoactive.
Everything we want to do, whether it's driving a fast car or singing in a choir, or bowling on a
adrenal
bowling
highs,
green, or shooting an arrow in archery. But we do all of that because it makes us feel better. It makes us feel high.
Yes.
And it's all allowed, but this one particular thing, drugs, and there's still cannabis in there, where it shouldn't be there because it's a plant. It's not a drug, it's a plant.
They kept trying to put it in there, didn't they? From even like the beginning of last century with the Indian Hemp Corporation, and they found all that to be rollicks about the psychosis and the various other things. They got that later done with the LaGuardia report and a few other reports I can't name off the. So the Watton report in the end in the UK. They all say that there's no problems, and yet the press still write it with an authority. Oh, it creates it. Don't look at caffeine creating psychosis. Don't look at alcohol creating psychosis. Don't look at nicotine. It's selective. What's the word? Cherry picking data in order to brainwash us into not thinking too much. So I'll shut up at that point because I think I was waffling on. But yes.
No, you raise a perfect point that again that we only.
Oh, what a point.
The people say, why do people take drugs? And they forget that the answer is so fucking obvious. It's because it does something good for them. You look at then somebody that is in a very desperate position that is then still willing to break the law, steal, to then score and they're living in a squat or whatever to get whatever substance they're using. They prefer that lifestyle over you stabilizing their life but removing that drug. And it's not just addiction it's got that in there. It's helping them in some way. It may be keeping an emotional wall between them and childhood abuse. It may be helping them sort of deal with maybe autism or Asperger's or something like that. That means that sensatorily life is too harsh for them. We've got to understand that not everyone has the same experience. So the people who are lucky enough to be neurotypical, born in a white middle class society and then walk around with all of this goddamn privilege that then go, well, drugs are bad, while smoking a cigarette and drinking those pints and going out with the lads and getting on the sesh and doing a bit of coke because it's all right, because that's fine. Not excusing the child labour around the world and the actual wars where thousands of people die. Very true. And then they look at the people that consume cannabis and like druggies or these psychonauts and people wanting to explore their consciousness with entheogenic compounds. And they demonize them and shit on them. And it's this narrowing of the perception that most people are unfortunately that disconnected from their own thoughts because of cognitive dissonance. So they're holding these opposing thoughts of then going, well, these are fine because society's not going to punish me for this too much, so I can kind of get away with this. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, if you're middle class and you get caught with coke, it's boys will be boys. Do you know what I mean? You're not even losing your position at school anymore. You got people like Boris Johnson and that coming out and going, "Oh well, we did some coke and there's no feedback." But then other people with cannabis or other substances having their lives destroyed. It's a ridiculous hypocrisy, and I think that they're struggling to have the conversation that is needed. That is, why was it criminalized? Can you prove what you said a century ago? There is no other legislation or cultural norm that we accept now that a century ago in parts of what you could own people. You could kill homosexuals. You could criminalize anybody of any different sexual orientation. You could imprison people for different religious beliefs. You could literally go and civilize another culture and commit genocide and your own people oppress it. And yet we're still using this same antiquated notion. You look at what we've known for 30 odd years now about the endocannabinoid system. You look at people like Mike Barnes and that are putting on these events that are inviting all of these doctors and shit, and none of them are turning up. No, because they've had no training on this thing. They're going, what are you the endocannabinoid system? I've had 10 years of experience of training. I've never heard of this thing. Yet they're wondering why their patients are dying, why they're prescribing drugs that are killing people, why they're not seeing the results that they want to see. They're not being ethical. They're not seeing the efficacy of the treatments that they've been told to do. Yet they're denying this. They can't then see that, wait, maybe we're wrong. I'm a neurologist, but actually there's cannabinoid receptors in the brain, and the endocannabinoid system is the largest regulatory system in the body. So maybe I need to take this and look at it. I've been looking at the tire, and actually it's a fucking car. And that's every nuanced specialist part of medicine in the modern world. Because if you look at the way that they're doing it, is they are so nuanced in their own individual pursuit of the body, they can't see what it's doing. So there's people prescribing drugs to deal with the consequence of arthritis that are then destroying the liver. There are people trying to deal with neurological conditions that kill the body. They're just these sectors are so divulged. When we look at cannabis, it's such a broad spectrum therapeutic. It's like a stem cell drug. You give yourself, you supplement and stimulate your endocannabinoid system, and your body goes, put this there, that, and it deals with its own shit. It self-regulates. You build a tolerance because then your body adapts to this thing. Because then
your body's central processing unit.
Yeah, and unlike the model for other drugs, that when you take a drug, you weaken the internal receptor systems. By supplementing the endocannabinoid system through exogenous phytocannabinoids, you don't cause this weakening. You don't cause, like you see, dopamine and serotonin drops in substances like amphetamines, etc., that are purely neurological based, that work on an entirely different receptor system. Because the endocannabinoid system is basically it seems to be so archaic and so old within us. That's the only way it can run every other goddamn system. Do you know what I mean? As if it's one of the primal systems that then built everything else, as we then develop other organs for other functionality, as we evolve to then move to be upright and develop our muscle structure and our bone structure that we have today. Cannabis, as we know, as a plant, has been around for 28 goddamn million years, as that we can find in fossil records and through various pursuits of research. They've compiled this kind of rough outline of how you got cannabis sativa L was then, or effectively what we now call cannabis indica, the short stocky thing, then came down from Himalayan regions, and then as it moved through the man, we then prefaced certain like fibrous traits or certain mutations, adaptability to drought or say more seed production, and then as it's been moved around the world, it's got so far from it that you ended up with sativa here, indica there. Then the Soviets came along and went, well, here's ruderalis, basically proving the missing link, and there's your thing of it. Humans have been around as the modern thing. They tell us 10,000 years ago we settled down with the agricultural revolution. They said, maybe 100,000 years. In the past 20 years, we've extended that. I think we're about 350,000 years now where we're still at the modern Homo sapien sapien. The current, we were around fucking like 400,000 years ago, as we are now. So then you think of the length of that evolution of time that we have then potentially been around this goddamn plant. There is something there that reciprocates it. There's a reason then when we eat the foods from our environment, they respond to our biomes. The joke of it in War of the Worlds in the film where the aliens die because of the bacteria in the water. We're just bacterial systems. We've had to evolve with these things in our environment for such a long period of time. This is why the synthetics are then so dangerous to us and potentially lethal. We've had no exposure to it. We've had no, but it doesn't work. No matter if they're trying to replicate the receptor in the brain, they're still missing it because there's something in the delivery. There's the synergy of the beta and the sequestered terpenoids, flavonoids, and cannabinoids. That entourage effect that now is legitimate science. 5 years ago, they were like, nah, get out of here. Now it's mass consensus, but they still don't know what the fuck it means. There's consensus on it, does it?
You can't break it down to its structure.
Because,
you can't take...
Because when they do, they lose it. It's what we're talking about with the atom thing. They then we'll go down terpenes. We'll break it down.
A good example.
And then they get lost and they go, right, take this and add it. And because they've made it without the cannabinoids or in the factory of the cannabis plant, for a terrible way to phrase it, it doesn't work. And they're scratching their heads and going, it's a single compound. Why doesn't it go in single lock? Cannabis is so multifaceted. The nature of this goddamn plant is she doesn't fit in any of this. You can't just call it hemp and say grow it like this.
NCOD gives 700 different ailments that it's good for God's sakes. And they're trying to break down, is it good for A, B, C, or D? And it is too much for them. As I said, quoting Culpepper earlier, too numerous to mention the uses for it, and that's deprived of it would take me on to what I think is good after which said, by the way, Carl Sagan put forward it was the first crop that we ever had, and I quite believe that as well. You know, I hadn't heard of the endocannabinoid system until the year 2000, I don't think, and it had been around a time then I could study. So it was hidden a little bit, or I'm a bit thick. I'm not sure. I was reading and doing other things, but it wasn't about. And now we're getting more used to it. We're finding out the effects. I would say that the clinical endocannabinoid deficiency is a real thing, and that's why cancers, I am speculating, but this is almost speculation too close to my heart, because when I gave up, I mean, I know that I got iller, so I mean, that's the thing. My fibrosis turned to cirrhosis, then I had to have I got liver cancer from there, and consequently a liver transplant. Now, I argued with a specialist I need to take cannabis as well, because I use cannabis instead of the drug alcohol. They don't want to give me a new liver and anybody wants to drink. I mean, a lot of people in there, and part of my liver damage was done by my excessive drinking when I was younger. I mean, I really was an extreme idiot for that stuff, and it's my problem, not other people's. I would not prohibit any drug. I think people need to learn about the drug culture by experience, and people around them taking care of them that have used those drugs. It's a community thing that could be looked at in a lot more learning way. I'm going on a more utopian idea, but I think that's happening in a way anyway in certain countries, and we need it more so in this country as well.
Well, I think to fill you with a little bit of hope, there's pockets of it emerging in this country where academia and the medical profession and etc. are scratching their heads. Like I said, they're not just listening to the pharmaceutical companies and going, okay, we'll take this isolate product and just attach it with this drug and we'll prescribe it and whatever. They're actually starting to scratch into the surface of the research and going, right, there's an endocannabinoid system. Okay, what's this entourage effect? Okay, so what does this mean? So what does that mean? And they're getting curious and more curious, and they're the ones of real decent nature that have aspired to get to their field because they truly want to help people. So if they're going to then follow that pursuit, now they've got this knowledge, they can't within themselves hold that back with the cognitive dissonance. Their own conscience has started picking away at them, you know what I mean? And they're the ones that are then starting to get together with a lot of doctors from other countries and are now starting to try and look beyond this. And exactly what you're saying, this idea of this theorized chronic endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome being the root cause of the vast majority of most degenerative ailments in modern medicine. Because, the reason cannabis isn't a panacea, a magic cure-all, it seems to be that the using phytocannabinoids to supplement your endogenous cannabinoid system and finding something that works with you, a profile of terpenes, cannabinoids, etc., and ingestion method that works for you in a routine, it supplements this system and then prevents these degenerative conditions. We're now seeing there's research around the consumption of cannabis is linked to lower levels of the sort of calcified plaque, the plaque that forms in the brain that's linked to Alzheimer's.
That's right.
So
That's right. I've seen that.
yeah. So there's, and then if you look at what we say with promoting apoptosis in cancer cells,
That's
it
right.
also stops. Basically, the analogy that was used that a healthy endocannabinoid system is an environment that isn't conducive to the growth of cancer. It just can't happen. If your endocannabinoid system is
and when I was a child, cancer was sort of 1 in 200. People were very unusual when they got cancer. I think it was the same for you. You're from the same era, Alan. And now the statistic is 1 in 2, I believe.
Yeah. So I read.
So is that where we've taken this out of the diet? You know, it wasn't till 1960 that they started aiming. I found this out the other day, so correct me if I'm wrong. I'm in good company. 1960 when they started doing low-grade cannabis, you know, the low THC to make, for whatever reason, you know, that got marketed. And before that, all the cannabis that would have been used as medicine, as eating material, because it's a good vegetable as well. We forget that, you know, anything with big leaves you can use as a vegetable. It can be used in so many ways, and it would have been used in every day. And as cattle feed, it would have gone through the system in certain ways. And now we've took it out there, and this has happened. Whether, you know, I'm only supposition, I don't know, but I mean, and I do know that you've got the American government done a patent on it, and was it 1971, about THC with cancer, and there's various experiments. So if that attachment to cancer, and then cancer's ran up by them banning it, am I being thick when I say it seems bloody obvious?
Not at all. I mean,
No.
the other thing to consider in this is what happened around the 1920s with the creation of the petroleum-based plastics. So we were obviously at a point where we were getting pretty good with plant-based polymers, with understanding how you can extract from the plant the I'm shit with the science on this, but like this thing's the cellulose sort of type material, and you could then form this into like carbon fiber sort of material, which is what Henry Ford did with the soybean, the flax, and the hemp at the time, to create these moldable sort of bodies and whatnot. So they were looking at that as a potential to use in plastics. The same lobby that then obviously moved and got diesel converted away from these idea of using plants to using crude oil, because obviously they were starting to find crude oil wherever the hell they were going when they were civilizing or discovering the rest of the world, you know what I'm saying? So that very quickly switched that. And then the consequence of this, of having petroleum-based plastics, is the leaching of BPAs and BPZs. There's a few other class of chemicals within this, but these are endocrine disruptors. They're also a class 1 carcinogen. So they promote the growth of cancer. They actually mutate cells, but they dramatically affect the endocrine system. So they affect sexual hormone production, and they affect sort of sperm count. And we now know from a study that was conducted, I think, between Japan, Australia, and one of the North American countries, that we eat an average of a credit card's worth of plastic a week. Through microplastics. So then you've got to consider, if that was then, these plastics were introduced, that were then leaching these chemicals into the food supply, and then everything, it's going to take a while for them to get there. That's what we're then starting to see around the 60s, 70s, with cancers becoming a lot more known and then being more nuanced in different parts of the body, and it still not being the older term of like consumption sort of idea that you just kind of die because the body dies. Even at that point, there was still that naivety in a lot of ways around what was going on.
Isn't it?
In the culture, at least. The academics are a bit smarter to this, but that's hit over there anyway. But then you consider we're now at the point that then broke down into microplastics. We're now on the point of nanoplastics. So nanoplastics are the biodegradable point that the microplastics break down to, where they pass the blood-brain barrier. So this means that when we're consuming them, they're able to then pass into the brain, they're able to build in deposits, and they're able to actually sit somewhere, then metastasize into sort of tumors and shit, and then you create a point of cancer, all the while then still leaching into your blood system and disrupting your endocrine system. So then the point of that is then that's going to affect genes, so that's going to affect generations. So then as you're breeding with these things, you're then going to affect the, for a terrible way of simplifying the science, the genes that are turned on or not. Do you know what I mean? So it then prepares that baby for the world and the environment it comes out into. And then, that's making them more susceptible. You then consider a society that is now kills 99.9% of bacteria, and how hygienic, overly hygienic in some ways that we became, which made then sensitivities to everything from wheat and flour and to everything else far more prevalent. So the weakening of this system, whereas then we find that people with things like asthma, you find people with things that have had certain allergies, or not serious like anaphylactic form allergies, but things where they've had difficult reactions, rashes, etc. to certain things, that after a long time of consuming cannabis, they don't have these reactions to them. That there is something that if you can reset your cannabinoid system, this was something that Rick Simpson spoke of in a bit quite crudish science, but good at the time, I suppose. And he said about mass dumping and getting it in, and it's what with the idea of trying to reset that system, of rebooting it. And it's in there's better science than it is now in terms of prescribed, in terms of dosage, etc. But I still believe the concept of this holds to be true. That if we had this thing that we naturally produce anyway, because we obviously produce endogenous cannabinoids, there are things we can do to promote this. So if you eat a balanced omega diet, this is again something that changed in the second half of the last century. Is we used to eat a much richer omega-6 to omega-3 diet. The balance of this helps supplement our metabolism, but we also convert those omegas into endogenous cannabinoids. We help supplement the system with that balance of a diet. So the change in our diet, the more sedentary lifestyle, because when we're not active, we're not then producing these endogenous cannabinoids. So we now know runners high, as they call it, they're endogenous cannabinoids. You're getting high, you're having that reaction because your body's giving that endorphic and that neurological feedback to keep you motivated to do the thing. So we're starting to get to that point, kind of, oof, well, how is this both all of the stuff out there and all of the mammals and all of the big creatures have this system? How is this everywhere? Do you know what I mean? It's they're trying so hard to get to that small nuance to understand this. They're trying to understand that tree and forgetting that we're in a fucking forest. Do you know what I mean?
Well, look what Crick had to do to find out the structure of DNA. So, I mean, perhaps they're on the wrong drugs. So, we all need to be able to, as that great bardic poets put, everybody needs to get stoned. And he's won an award for literature, hasn't he, Dylan? And if he writes that, we've got to take it seriously. I'm sort of making a joke of it, but the reality is, the medicinal part is important. It is important, but taking it out of our diet, we should be eating it. We should be using it in daily diet. We should be putting in lotions on us and everything else. It shouldn't be where it's an underground market price that people finding it too hard to make the lotions and potions from it like they could do with nettles or various other plants are out there. There's no restrictions on opium poppies, how many are going. Why should they be restrictions on cannabis plants? It's a bloody helpful plant that we should all be allowed to plant. No licenses and that. This is restrictiveness, laws by fear. And the sooner we recognise it, the sooner we demand our human rights, which Alun puts a lot more eloquently as me forward in his way of phrasing it. But that is what they're doing. I'm getting bullied for trying to be better, and it's not very good.
Well, there was once upon a time, there was a garden called the Garden of Eden, and there was two people in it, Adam and Eve. And God came along and said, you can eat anything you like in that garden, but not that tree. And what did they do? They ate of that tree. So in 1928, some nameless politician, I don't even know who it was, came along and said, you can do whatever you want. You can have any plant you want, but not that bush. Fuck off. If God can't, tell Adam and Eve not to eat the apple, that politician's not even God. Why should we listen to him? And then they come along and they gave us the official right to do what we want in our house. And then they tell us, but not that plant. That's the start of it. And that's the end of it. It's those two words to those politicians, or three words to people like, leave me alone.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a good analogy to draw from, because I suppose the eating of the apple is the tree of knowledge, isn't it? And then by doing it, they gain knowledge of life and death. And this is what and this is what expelled us from the Garden of Eden, to follow the fable or the myth, is however you want to term it. And it's that knowledge of life and death. I would say then that it's kind of true as a fable of we then became aware of the power of plants, if you want to read it as that fable. Yeah. And we went from living this limited kind of, oh, God is centric to the universe, to going, wait, maybe it's not kind of what we think of, a magic man in the sky and a parental figure directing us. There is far more to what we see before us, and that we should start to explore this. And I think that's a fable that has been passed down and been sort of made to fit the religious inclinations of the day. We know this obviously from the kind of the religion eating the religion with each of the empires as they came across. They kind of went, no, you worship our shit or you get out. They adapt enough of their traditions that they accept it, they move on, and that becomes standard, and then that becomes history. But all of them back through the centuries, and again through this, as we know of the modern Homo sapien, they'll have had the same religions and ideas. They'll have been telling the same stories and fables, just in different ways. And I truly believe it's science. They're trying to tell stories through. They're trying to speak of science through fables before they have the ability to measure it or anything. They're trying to discuss the power of these things.
If you ever get a chance to read a book called The Tower of Physics, have you ever heard of it? The Tower of Physics, TAO, The Tower of Physics, and it's a comparison between modern day nuclear and cosmological physics and the ancient beliefs from Hinduism and religions like that. Shiva's dance. The universe is held together by Shiva's dance. So long as Shiva, the Hindu god aspect of Brahma, dances, the universe will stay together. Now they look at the interaction between the different forms of energies, and they call it the dance of the weak and the strong. It's a dance. It's Shiva's dance. It's just that we now see it in a different way. We don't have gods flying around in the sky. You know, we have like science. Science to me, I studied science, you know. I studied chemistry. They told me about atoms. They told me about subatomic particles. They told me about, later on, they told me about black holes and stuff like that. And I believed it. I believe in atoms. I believe in subatomic particles. I believe in black holes. I believe in you know, myself, my life, my consciousness. But nobody can actually tell me what that is. You know, I just believe in it. It's just another religion.
Exactly that. And again, so the stories that we're telling now of talking about atoms and whatever else, the centuries to come will look at this in through a lens of going, how archaic, how benign, how ridiculous these stories they tell themselves. But we do it as people that can then look at what's happened with the drug war, etc. And eventually the consensus of the global community, enough people where the story will change, that myth, that narrative will change. They'll find a new scapegoat. They'll find a new thing to demonize and to go, that's all the ills of society. Instead of looking at the socio-economic impact of government policy, of international trade, of the priorities of the human species, rather than having those conversations, we go, all bad things happen because of drugs, all bad things happen because of immigrants, all bad things happen because of... And we're just looking for these stupid fucking scapegoats to be able to put off the conversation. And the conversation is our structure that we live under today, the idea of monarchy in this country and being subservient to somebody born into power. You know, all of these antiquated ideas that we're still using fundamental Christian ideals to set laws in this country. None of this, we haven't updated anything. We're living through tradition, which is effectively peer pressure from dead people. We're trying to honour our fathers and our grandfathers and whomever, without actually realising if they were here today, they'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? Do you see all the stuff you know? We didn't know shit 30 years ago. Do something. And so this is why I think it's wonderful that it's evolved from sort of where you guys have come from, of the birth of the digital age, and sort of the online activism, or people basically kind of being forced into online activism because of what happened with law change and social change in the UK, has now led to a generation now that have such power in their pockets with their phones. You know what I mean? People get busted at events, and like 50 people pull out phones and record that thing. They put pressure on the cops till the cops kind of go, oh, get away. We have such power to document what they're doing. We have such power to connect. I mean, my audience base, I saw a guy in here earlier jumped up saying from Canada. If I look at the downloads of the podcast, we've got people in Finland, in Norway, in India, in Australia, in all pockets of the world. People are dying for these conversations. They're dying for access to, as Winston was saying, intellectual conversations about this, because they're bored of then having the conversation with their family or with whomever else that goes, well, it causes psychosis and you shouldn't really be doing this drug. And they're not willing to put down their belief for a second and acknowledge somebody else's, because that's all any of this is. There is no fact. There is no true truth in that sense. There is only then the consensus. We can all come together, and if we don't have any biases or any vested interest, can all observe the same event and go, that's that. You know what I mean? We all need to be able to point at something and go, that's a wall. Wall? Cool.
Yeah.
We went through a millennia of this, of progressing through language evolution to arrive at a point now where they're using language against us. So it is part of a cannabis activist. Now there's pockets for decriminalization, pockets for legalization. I now changed my stance from re-legalization to deschedule. There's so many complex nuances because of the interpretations of the words.
Yeah.
So it's another way that the disempower us.
And also the divide and separate technique. So one group will then start attacking another group, saying that their ethos is better than theirs and blah, blah. And it's the same old song where we should all be going, let's get cannabis sorted, then we can work out what we want to do from there. Until that's sorted, we haven't got freedom, as Jack here has said. Without the ability to plant that seed, it's not going to be legal or decriminalized or rescheduled, or I just want to use it, whatever you call it. I just want to use it. You know, it makes me feel better, and that's the main thing about it. I know what those other recreational drugs they give me do not make me feel better. And when I've used pharmaceutical drugs recreationally as well, they've not made me feel better. When I've used them normally, they've not made me feel better. But I've had to use drugs in order to cure myself in various things. So I'm not anti-drugs from the pharmacy system, but there is pockets of like people abusing the pharmacy drugs, too many tranquilizers, too many this, too many that, just because they are, and I think you put it earlier, experimenting. They'll drop one chemical out and then see what bounces back, feasibility studies. And it is a bit frightening. And the fact we're not allowed cannabis, which it is guilty of making us think critically, but that's it. We start questioning, we start asking questions. And is that such a bad thing in these days when we've got a planet that needs redressing, needs restructuring to where we're not killing it with pollutants and, hydrocarbons, etc. Without going into a long rhetoric about it, doesn't it need some sensible thinking for a change? So, that's what I'd ask for if anybody was listening.
I think my dream is to make cannabis boring. I love weed. I love it. God, I spend some days 12, 14 hours in meetings, reading, writing, recording stuff like this. It's my life. It has become so much of my life. It already was as a youth. I always had that. I feel a kinship to this, to its culture and to this planet. It helps me. It benefits me, and I've always had this kind of feeling like an obligation of guardianship. Do you know what I mean? And then in 2017, when I kind of started my route with this, and I saw the feedback I got and the response, and I got to really understand the community and the scope and scale of the con against us and the conspiracy against us, that now I can't rest. I truly can't rest, and I am fighting for the day. Well, it's done. It's boring. I don't care if my name's even in the papers or anything after it or what. I don't care. I'm happy to fight and do what I can do, because then I want to be able to walk down the street and look at a cop again. Every time I see a blue light, not get my and that muscle in my back going, shit, where
they
am
should
I?
be there
What's in
to
my
protect
pockets?
us. They should be there to protect us. I've got a report there called Times Are Changing from 2000. This was all Chris's stuff, by the way. I was just digging it out and having a look. I got brave before this. And it's, the year 2000. The police are saying, look, you need cannabis. It's not as bad as alcohol or whatever. Then Nut goes and says it later on, and we're having a go and protest outside Parliament for him because it was, I think during the equation, though, ecstasy is not bad, but he'd said that thing about the comparison between ecstasy and horse riding 6 months prior in another interview. The media are guilty. They're killing people by promoting the wrong bloody drugs. And that's one thing I like about social media is we create our own media, and I believe polarities will meet, and the sensible heads will sort it out en route. So let's get our thinking brains on and start sorting out what Extinction Rebellion really want: a clean environment. Don't we all want that? So we can be used to that. There's some good brains that take herbs and spices, etc. Use this accordingly.
Leave it. Yeah,
Waffling.
agreed. Well, I suppose I won't keep you much longer, gentlemen. You've given me 2 hours
Thank
already.
you. My brain's just used.
Really appreciative. I suppose I'll ask you just one more sort of final summation of a question here. Is that what do you think? What lessons can my generation of activists learn from what you guys did in the early 2000s? What do you see that's absent now? Because you guys got to some serious points of success. You were able to actually stand as candidates, registered as a political party. You were taken seriously and interviewed on national platforms and actually given that voice. Whereas now, as activists fighting for true adult consumer market, so we're all free to do it, we're silenced. We're left out of the conversation because we're not medical or hemp or CBD.
Well, I'd like to see some kind of new political party and see that platform come back again.
Would be a good one.
One of the things that's changed now is that you can no longer stand for election if you've got a criminal record.
That's right.
So that puts me and a lot of people out of it. I could do that in 2001. I could stand for Parliament in 2001. Now I think I maybe I could stand for Parliament, but I couldn't take the seat. I'm not sure of the exact law. So if there's a political party, it's going to have to be new people without criminal records. I think the value of that is the platform. Even if there's no candidates or maybe one candidate now and again, the value is the platform, the leaflet through the door, the interviews, and so on. The problem is the same now as it was then. It's numbers. When we say, for instance, if everybody give us £1, if every smoker in the UK give us £1, we could take the government to court 6 times, 10 times, If everybody voted for us, if everybody wrote a letter to the MP, if everybody turned up at smoking in the park, but everybody wants, most people, see, the truth is, without being, going into the realms of paranoia, the truth is that there's millions of people smoking it in Britain and eating it and so on. They estimate 300,000 people growing it at home. There's only 150 to 200,000 police. They can't possibly police it. The chances, if you keep quiet about it, you don't make a noise, you don't advertise, you grow, and you use a filter on your fan if you're growing it, and you don't tell people, and you don't go on the internet showing people your crop, chances of getting busted are quite slim. And in reality, not so many people go to jail now as did 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
That's
the situation has changed. We are getting there, with or without change of law. We are getting there. It's kind of, if you can grow some at home or get a good supply of clean cannabis at a decent price and smoke it at home and not fall foul of the law, we're there.
Yeah, that's what we need.
We're there. We just need to make it official.
Yeah.
We just need to make it so they turn around and say, we can't stop it, lads. You know, and then they jump on the bandwagon and make the money out of it, which is why I agree with Winston. You know, growing your own is very, very important, that people can grow their own. You know, so they don't have to rely on a dealer, they don't have to rely on a coffee shop or a cannabis club or a prescription. You know, they can just grow their own at home, use it at home, share it at home, not hurt anybody, get on with their lives, you know, as we're entitled to. And that's what I think that we need to just push that and make all those people out there. I used to have this thing I call pigs. P-I-G-S, pigs, like the enemies of legalization. And it wasn't the police. Pigs is the reasons, the obstacles in the way of legalization. P, paranoia and fear of persecution. I, ignorance and indifference. G, greed. And S, for squabbles. Squabbles we have within the cannabis movement. We should go this way, we should go that way. We should go for this first, we should go for that second, you know, get past the squabbles.
Sure.
Everybody, in all the groups, everybody says we all want the same thing. So why can't we all work together? Why do we have to keep arguing about what's going to work and what's not going to work? Let's all work together and try it. And just legitimize what's already happening with the bonus that if we legitimize it, there will be regulations on supply so that there'll be consumer protection, tax on profits, keep it away from vulnerable people, hygiene, safe places to go, you know, which alcohol people, they have all that.
Yeah, exactly. They've worked the infrastructure, they've developed it. They've then now got on alcohol advertising, drink aware. So there already is the mechanisms within these things for things like sin tax, for example, that they could incorporate it into society. And it feels that there is something more to this that we've alluded to. If you then look at the legislation that they've created for the mechanism in the 61 Convention for withdrawal. So they've then basically said that it can be withdrawal, and then your country can change your ruling on the drugs, but it can only work if the government is the one who then sets the law in that space. They're not allowed to free themselves from the convention. So this is why Canada and Uruguay are not legal countries. They have legalized with a capital L under the modern definition of what legalization means, which is a controlled access model, which still has criminalization to control and prop it up. And it still perpetuates that illicit, unregulated market. On the other side is then obviously decriminalization, where they just kind of look the other way, and the cartels and the larger organizations control the vast majority of the market share. So we're looking for obviously that thing in between, which is, I drove past an allotment today and I saw a sign of a guy selling eggs. And second time I've seen it, and my brain didn't really clock to it, and I went, all right, eggs are a commodity. Eggs are dangerous. You can get salmonella, you can die from eggs. You eat bad egg, you can die. And then I was thinking, right, so if you produce something and you sell it, is he going to have a license? If I go and ask that guy, what permission have you got? You got a trader's license? How many cops will drive past him every goddamn day and not even consider this? You get reported to trading standards, and probably the officers themselves will go, get out of here. We're not interested in something like that. Yeah. Do you know, that discretion, that's what we want. We want cannabis to be treated like that, so that it can be highly regulated in terms of when it's sold and put into foods in restaurants. And if there's then a problem, they're accountable. You can then put it into products, as we do with like cakes and flour and into batter mixes and all of these plethora of things. But then you can get chickens and produce them at home. If you then abuse the chickens, you will then get dealt with by the RSPCA. There's crimes there. So we're regulating and controlling the dangers and harms of it. And I'm a vegan, so I'm not going to get involved in the ethics of it, so we'll ignore that for a second. But we're controlling the idea of it in that way, but not this thing itself. That's where I want to see cannabis. If you then choose to make a home out of it, you've got to adhere to building regulations. And if you make that hempcrete poorly, you go to prison for making a dangerous habitat. In the same way that if you make a medical product and it's dangerous, you're not done for the cannabis, you're done for the poor preparation in it.
Yes.
And I think that is what we need in this. There's always going to need to be laws. We can't ever free the weed, man, and be truly Wild West, because there are potential harms of cannabis, there are consequences of it, and it can be dangerous if left in an unregulated market. We're seeing that.
If they take it out of the Misuse of Drugs Act, it will become like everything else. All those regulations apply on supply.
Yeah.
But to grow your own herbs, like growing any plant, I mean, I can grow dangerous plants out there with no restrictions on how many of them that I grow and what I do with the with the plants or whatever.
As an individual, we should never face that.
So we shouldn't be facing that prejudice, all those rules and regulations they'd want to put with grow your own. Herbalism, something that we all practice by our dietary, your food is your medicine and all that sort of stuff. I mean, we're learning it more so, and that's why I scream for organic wherever possible, because I'm not over keen on getting insecticides into me. Nervous system is where I believe it goes. So I mean, we've got to be careful. It's one of those things.
If you grow at home under lights, you should be allowed to call in an electrician to make sure it's safe.
Yeah.
I mean, I once, an elderly lady I knew, she was growing some plants, and she called me, she says, "Can you come round, please? I need your help." So I went round. The outside drain had flooded in the heavy rain, and it all poured down into her cellar. And she said, "I want you to come and look in the cellar." Well, I went down into the cellar. She took her shoes off, and she walked down into the cellar and walked into this water up to her ankles. I said, "Come on out, get out quick! There's wires all over the place, on the floor. What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I read somewhere that if you go into water and electricity, take your shoes off." Where she read that, and of course we had to switch the electricity off the mains and dry it all out, But that situation where she was afraid to call in an electrician.
And if she had the education was there. I once did a giveaway in Durham. I can't remember what the hell I called it, but basically I walked around with the giant club flag and a bag full of spliffs, and I went to like 5 or 6 locations on a live stream, and I said, "First one to find me gets a joint." First couple of people to find us. And the last guy that actually flagged me was the safety inspector for Durham fire department, and he basically ended up in this role because he got injured on the job. So he was taking a lot of opioids. So I ended up having a conversation with him about supplementing cannabis instead of using opium as a pain reliever. And then I pitched him this idea of getting somebody like myself from the club or from the community to talk to the fire department about creating an education awareness scheme, that kind of a public thing that if you grow cannabis, keep your ballast above water level, make sure your plugs this, don't overload systems, make sure, and basic education on it is a way to prevent the thousands of fires that there are. We probably actually are thousands of fires that have started from shittily produced cannabis growers, especially the ones that then seek to fucking circumnavigate the electric systems. So it's educate for me. It's education above everything, and that comes with, as you said, the relaxation. If we ended up treating cannabis like eggs, for the analogy we've chosen tonight, the education would be there. Everyone knows what a goddamn egg is. Everyone knows what it'll do, what it tastes like, etc. And they make their choice whether to interact it or not. Again, I'm vegan, but eggs exist because birds exist. I'm not gonna then go destroy the eggs, destroy the birds. It's like, no, we have to get to that point of going that my preferences should not be yours. As Winston said, the idea of going I don't drink alcohol either, but again, the idea of prohibiting such a thing, monstrous. What they're doing around tobacco at the minute, you're just creating a more of an unregulated market where then places are not, then this is restrict. You're then creating more dangerous substances where they're less regulated. You're then creating an import of them in a black, I keep going to use black market, and I hate the term, and I'm trying not to use it, an unregulated underground market. That then could otherwise be taking part in the tax system, which then could actually be helping offset the potential harms of these drugs, because that's what needs to occur with this. It's all well and good as making the profit, but if we're not reinvesting that back into the system, if we're not vertically integrating these companies that are growing weed to take their sticks and stems to build resources to produce graphene for batteries and everything else, then we're missing the point. So I think that I suppose in summation for me for this evening, what you two wonderful gentlemen have taught me is that we have come far. In our knowledge, we have come far in the fact that how free I have been for the past 5 years to be as vocal as I have been, to be on the BBC, to go on the Victoria Derbyshire show, to write the shit I write, to do the lives I've done, to travel the way I've travelled, and to still be free. I could not have done this in your day. No, but I can do this because of you. That's what I'm saying. It's
I would, it's because of Alun and others that we can get away with it. And I would agree, it's all stepping stones to reaching that, because now the next stepping stone is like what's happening in Oregon and all that. The psychedelic world's going to more come in as a recreational, and of course they're going to recognize the medical qualities. They're going to be looking at various mushrooms, various remedies that have been worldwide, and understand more plants and these psychoactive ingredients, where the balance of these plants that nature's created in order to get that interaction with mankind is a learning tool in many ways that we neglect. And I find that my wannabe herbalist bit wants to understand the inner essence of any plant, and that's why I study them. I think Veritas or something, something Van Bingen called it in the 16th century abbess, but I pronounced the name totally wrong there. But Veritas, that sort of energy that you get off of plants, and I think the recognition now is what's happening. It's that new awakening that these plants are teaching mechanism like anything around us is. We need to take more care of this land. That's why people are getting in the streets and saying, please don't do this in pollution's name and don't do that. Rethink these things through. And we've got the brains and technology to rethink things through with a criteria of anti-pollution. Now, why aren't they listening to us? Because the framework and network set up for fossil fuels, other oils and all that, and we've put it forward with a Jack era way of using all this, and people aren't listening to us. So I'm just going to carry on banging my head against the wall and having a few pipes. But we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep trying because it's right to do what's right is right, isn't it?
Exactly that, and the truth will always be the truth. And you said it perfectly with stepping stones. I know I know if I'm lucky enough to live to your age and to still be in the fight at that point, that there'll still be fight to be had.
I hope it's not.
We'll have little concessions, but I'm an idealist, and frankly, I've got nothing else to do. I don't want to get married. I don't want kids. I'm not interested in those kind of paradigms. So what else am I going to do in my life? Come on, I'm gonna pester and poke that goddamn bear until there is no prohibition left. And I mean that truly, because we have to accept human behavior. If it exists, it fucking exists. If people like to do it, you're not allowed to tell them no. To educate them and go, this is dangerous to others. So look at the peanut analogy. Some people die from peanuts. They go into anaphylactic shock. We label everything that's got peanuts on. Yeah. We don't then try and ban peanuts, because we have to look at the spectrum of this. And that's what we're doing now with the LGBTQ plus movement, of then accepting sexual expression, of accepting sexual identity, of allowing people to be their weird and wonderful selves. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. I mean that in the most beautiful and positive way, because that's what's allowing us to now have this modern movement of social justice, this new progressive period that we're living in, where people are challenging these status quos and going, wait a minute, why do they get preference if they have kids? Why is marriage an institution, but then a civil partnership is considered less in law? Why is this structure set this way? Why is this? The people are challenging these traditions and these archaic institutions and ideals, and going, you have to accept everybody in that. You can't then go, if you don't confide, you're out there. Do you know how many millions of people live on the fringe in this country because of this way they smell, because they consume a little bit of the wacky backy? Or, on the weekends they like to go to a rave, or they like to sniff a bit of coke when they're out drinking with the lads or whatever. They live a quiet, more subdued life because they're scared of the consequences that would happen if they were exposed to be doing that. They're not proud of their behavior because they're still doing it. They're still engaging in it because they're still finding something useful in it. So this shows that the law is an ass, and it is not a dissuader. All it is there to do is to catch the low-hanging fruit that they have put there through their economic policies. So we're in a fucking weird position where it's all exposed. It's like we've got all the jigsaw pieces, but we haven't flipped the box yet. So we've got a few corners and a few side bits, and they're medical, yeah. And we figured this here, there, and there's a few of us, and I don't mean myself, and I don't mean as individuals. I mean like collective movements, organizations, ideologies, and not ideologies, but ideas and ethoses that are out there that have got an idea of what's on the other side of the box. But it's going to take us all to kind of go, wait, we might all be wrong. Let's turn the fucking thing over. That's where we need to get to at the minute, is because none of us are right. We all have parts that are right and parts that are wrong, and we all have good fucking ideas. But the thing that it's going to look like in 30 years, it's going to be nothing like what the hell we're talking about right now. So we need to kind of accept that fallibility. We need to
I'll be 101.
Hopefully we're kicking around and I'll still be doing this podcast, so we'll get you on again.
So, it is progressing. Everything is growing around the world. Each step is going. Instead of studying football charts as I would have done as a child, I study what's happening in different countries, what's happening in the States, what's happening in Canada, Uruguay, all these other places, and try and keep up with what's going. But good God, is there the rules and regulations having battles in there over a bloody therapeutic plant, not even anything that can damage you. The worst thing you do is make you feel better. And they go, no. And it's like, it still feels like pushing that car uphill you was on about earlier. But I'm quite happy to carry on pushing it till people bloody listen. It kickstarts. We need to keep saying it till people keep listening.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
In any format, I've ended up making cartoons with Norris Nouveau and a few people, made songs with Chris and sung about it. I have consumed a lot in the middle of it as well, and thoroughly enjoyed it, and tried to stay as healthy as I can, just to prove that it's not that bad for you. So, please give us a chance. Don't demonize us anymore. We're not idiots. We're experimenting. Experiment is what they did. Medical Mavericks years ago with various gases, nitrous oxide, they're having a laugh, and stuff like that. That they were having parties at. It's experimentation. It's science. We want to find about the psyche, the consciousness levels in various formats and modes. Why not? Why not enjoy it while we're doing it? Because that's what I found about cannabis. I enjoy the experiments while I'm on it. So there you go. Giggles being a side effect I can always cope with. Tolerance levels, I try to get around them by changing the strains that I take every few days, and using hashish, and try and use butters and lotions and stuff like that, just to kill the aches and pains after I said two back operations and a liver transplant and alcoholism and a very few other isms to fight in my life. Cannabis has been that opening door away from everything that was trying to drag me down. And that's when Alun said, when you realise you want to get more people doing it. I've had that bug. I had that bug with Chris. We loved it. He was giving everything away. Even the judge took this as political motivation for what we was doing, and he locked Chris away, saying he was a decent and honest man. And I'm like, where the hell is the logic? The judge said.
The judge said that.
Yeah, where's the logic here? I saw this bloke help thousands of people. We was running an organisation as part of the project. The thing was called the Herb Connection. So we was looking after patients. And I remember when I got locked on remand, I went straight into this undone me pockets, and this prison officer said to me, he said, how much money you got on you? And it was something like £1.80, and he laughed. He said, is that the big sort of cannabis coffee shop over there and all that? I said, manager, he was calling me. And I said, well, we've got 208 patients that we're looking after. And I felt proud in that moment, and they were all being helped out every time they needed something. It had been for months, and that was part of feeding back into that system that they're doing in places like California, where the money from the change is going over back to the systems to help on environmental projects, teaching projects. You know, this is things we should be putting into those communities you were saying earlier, the estates that I was brought up in as well, National Coal Board estates when I was a kid and that. And like, I realise there's a lot of talent in these places if they're nurtured, if they're taught properly. We've got the technology now in order to teach properly. We've got the lockdown. We need to keep people in their cells. So we should be doing more online stuff would be my wanting out of this. But, you know, my programming sort of systems analyst head comes in, because I learned a bit of that en route, and like, wow, that's frightening what's happening with technology taking everybody's jobs. We've got to learn education and enjoy that instead. Is another subject, I think.
Well, I think that there's a lot that we could speak on to that. So yeah, I suppose we'll wrap it up now. I think, gentlemen, I would definitely want to get you back doing something similar where we maybe talk about some things a bit more nuanced. I think a lot of people would like to hear more about sort of Dutch experience days and sort of how the first coffee shop sort of came, because again, a lot of people are not aware of the cafes that sort of preceded the clubs. Most people think the clubs kind of arrived under the new guise of the Spanish sort of style, whereas there's a lot more foundation that we didn't get to cover because there's just so fucking much to discuss that we could literally sit here for another 20 hours and not even scratch that surface either. But I'm not going to subject our audience to that this evening, so you'd be happy to know that.
Please don't.
I'm not, dude, I've been sat here for 5 hours now. For 5 hours, 20 minutes, I have been sat in this chair on talking to somebody's people, either live or in a conference calls. So I'm very happy to
you do
call
good
this
at this. You do good at this. You do good at this. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for doing it. I've enjoyed watching your program.
I appreciate that.
It's been terrific. Yeah.
No.
I'd just like to say very quickly, the three giants in the campaign in the cannabis world I'd like to mention, because they're not with us anymore, but they contributed remarkably. Howard Marks for bringing all the cannabis into the country, and he was the first person to stand for election and inspire the LCA. Dr. Lester Grinspoon for his work from Harvard University, for his work, and Jack Herer for his work, his book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, which I recommend to everybody. And they inspired me, and without them, I wouldn't be saying what I'm saying.
Snap.
Yeah, it's wonderful that I then get to consider the generation of yourselves as well as kind of the same, that without your steps in this country, without what you have done and continue to do with the CC guide, for example, which I'm now going to show to people. You can actually follow Free Winston Matthews on Facebook. Here you go. You can check out Alun Buffry, author publisher here.
It's just Free Winston Matthews to grow his own. They freed me out of prison, but they wouldn't let me grow what they locked me away for. So I'm still not bloody free, technically, in my eyes. So that's why I keep the Free Winston Matthews to grow his own. I had at the end of that in reality.
And then,
we need it.
I'll be sharing. I just want to show you these couple of pictures. This is from the Ice Mock article to Young Winston. And then I wanted to show you these pictures. This is what did you say, Alan? When was the first picture from?
1968.
There you go. That's Alan from 1968. Pre-cannabis, is this?
Yes, pre-cannabis. Starting out at university.
Here's post-cannabis. Can you notice a difference there, guys? A little bit of a cultural influence there.
The hippie comes out.
Just wanted to share that with you guys. I'll be sticking some links as well on top of this. I'll basically copy and paste these onto this once I get off here. Once again, just wanted to thank you both. And like I said, I know that I'm here to kind of inspire and to work and to produce and to play my part in this. I am a piece in that jigsaw puzzle, as we all are. And part of what I'm trying to do with this project and with the lives and with the podcast and everything else is to bring all these voices together and to get everyone to understand that it isn't a couple of people that discovered this X, Y, and Z. It's always been here, and there have been thousands of us fighting in different ways. Now we have the technology. We are limited and hampered by algorithms and by censorship, etc. But we still have that passion and that truth. What holds true for you guys that made you stand in those streets, stand up to the cops, to run for elections, to risk going to jail is still true for the people today. And I hope that the audience that have watched this are in some small way inspired to participate more in the larger conversation. And it doesn't have to mean getting involved with any one organization. Just have a conversation with your loved ones, the people around you. Do some research. I mean, if you're already watching my channel, you already know enough to you're questioning the mainstream narrative. So by all means, go and research it as much as you can and learn, because that knowledge is true power. The day will come when this will change. As Winston said about mechanization and about automation, the world is going to change for employment, and what that's going to look like is cannabis. Everything. It's going to be our homes. It's going to be our clothes. It's going to be our food. It's going to be our drugs. It's going to be our medicine. It's going to be everything. So you can get ahead of that now by building that knowledge, by seeing beyond the facade and this installation of Prohibition 2.0, and whatever way you choose to do that, I applaud you for it. So thank you, and do continue to do it. The one thing I'll ask, obviously quite selfishly, if you wouldn't mind giving me a like and a share while you're there. Check us out on all social media platforms at The Simpa Life. If you've enjoyed this, or if you've enjoyed any of the content I produced, please check out patreon.com/Simpa Life, where you can consider contributing for less than a cup of coffee a week to help me just literally keep the lights on, pay for the subscription services I need to produce these lives, and produce more content like this, because I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, guys. So once again, thank you so much for this evening.
It was fun. Yes, absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for having us on here, and please carry on the brilliant work. I look forward to your programs. But
beautiful.
Take care. Take care. And Alun, thank you for everything in life, and still being around, still fighting every day. Thank you.
I echo those sentiments. So yeah, thank you very much, gentlemen. We will end this live stream, and thank you to all of our audience, and shout out as always to our Twitch listener. I see you.
Let's do it.